Chapter 562. Gong Yin Jia's terrifying aura surged everywhere. It then firmly locked upon Yi Shiwen. Gong Yin Jia looked outstanding and peerless at this moment, just like a devil god. He strode forward in a flash, and endless divine beams whistled and swept out. Those divine beams then transformed into a fierce attack and bombarded towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. This was the most dreadful long-ranged attack. Meanwhile, black-robed old Een had quickly recovered by relying upon this Een-rich place. However, his complexion had turned even paler. He wasn't feeling well because he had inhaled a large amount of evil Een energy in an instant. However, he had no other option but to do so in order to deal with Yi Shiwen. His attack transformed into a huge Een and Yang fish and suddenly swept towards Yi Shiwen. Two dreadful attacks were simultaneously sweeping towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. Everyone felt that Yi Shiwen couldn't resist these two dreadful attacks at the same time. In fact, it would have been impressive if he could resist even one, let alone two. Energy waves surged all around, and the evil Een energy in the surroundings suddenly began to boil. It seemed as if the world had been rocked by a major disaster. Yi Shiwen didn't hold back even a bit. His both hands emitted seemingly inexhaustible golden lights. It seemed as if these golden beams would tear apart the entire world. Yi Ziwen's hands tore apart those two dreadful attacks as soon as they arrived in front of him. His eyes looked incomparably deep at the moment. It seemed as if the cycle of rebirth and destruction of the universe was taking place inside them. His killing intention was unhindered. He had become even more determined to kill these two men. These two men had long been planning to kill him, and he had also planned to kill them before they got ready. Bang! 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 The three men suddenly engaged in a battle in the air above the tomb. The two parties didn't give each other any chance to gain the upper hand. They were exhausting all of their power in order to kill the opposite party. He is fighting two great experts at the same time. Gu Tian's eyes revealed an astonished expression. He had been blown away by Gong Yin Jia in one kick earlier, and there were certainly many reasons behind that. However, he had no choice but to admit that Gong Yin Jia was more powerful than him. However, Gong Yin Jia and black-robed old Een hadn't been able to bring down Yi Shiwen even after they had joined hands. Moreover, he hasn't fallen into any disadvantageous positions till now. Yi Shiwen is just too ferocious. Xiao Yuan also hadn't anticipated that things would turn out like this. She had initially guessed that the best Yi Shiwen could do on having to face the combined attack of these two men was retreat. However, Yi Shiwen was in a far better situation at the moment than what she had imagined. Yi Ziwen's fists appeared like big stars. It seemed as if a star had ignited and started to boil every time he brandished his fist. A universe-like scene had appeared all around him. The fight had reached a superheated stage, and neither side was holding back at this time. Each of Yi Ziwen's fist was transforming into a big star and was then smashing down. These stars were the embodiment of the ideal condition of the most callous fist intention out there, which Yi Shiwen had comprehended. One could only imagine their suppression force. Gong Yin Jia and black-robed old Een had gone all out as well. But they had been becoming increasingly terrified in their heart as they had continued their attack on Yi Shiwen. It was a kind of mood that was very hard to describe for them. After all, they had been forced into a disadvantageous position by Yi Shiwen even after they had collaborated. Such a thing had never happened to them. Has Yi Shiwen already reached the sage, accomplished realm? They had already reached their peak state as per their capabilities of sage great perfection realm. Bang! Yi Shiwen shot another fist. This fist drew out a universe. It then evolved into a big star and swept out. This was the most dreadful fist attack. Yi Ziwen's fist attacks were becoming increasingly smoother with the progression of this fight. Moreover, he also began to feel a slight need to make a breakthrough. This discovery had made him excited. This tomb was simply a heaven for him, since he could transform the negative Een energy in this tomb into his own. Consequently, this was the best sacred place for his cultivation. The result of cultivating at this place could be 10 times better than that of cultivating outside. Moreover, he wasn't even a bit worried about his foundation being unstable at this place. In fact, he hadn't come across a time when he had felt that his foundation was unstable. On the contrary, he had felt it to be a bit too stable the majority of time. And that was why it had become very difficult for him to make the breakthrough into every major realm. Bang! The dreadful fist pressure routed the defenses of both men. In fact, their defenses looked laughable as they faced such a terrifying attack. Poof! Black-robed old Ian had the weakest martial power among them. He couldn't resist such a violent collision and spouted a mouthful of blood. His body went out flying and all of his bones got broken. He had once again been blown away by Yi Shiwen, and that too as strongly as the first time. Even he and Gong Yin-jia together couldn't pose any threat to Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen didn't delay. He immediately rushed towards black-robed old Ian. "Don't you dare think of that," Gong Yin-jia roared in his hoarse voice. He knew that he would be Yi Zaiwen's next target once Yi Shiwen had killed black-robed old Ian, and he might not be able to escape in that situation. Therefore, he must not let Yi Shiwen kill black-robed old Ian. His big and terrifying leg kicked out an endless stream of divine beams in the surrounding space. It seemed that these divine beams would crush the space. They even contained faint traces of Tao principles. Yi Shiwen shot sword energy through the back of his hand. The sword energy swept across and suppressed everything in the surroundings. It then went towards that big leg. Bang! This was a terrifying collision, and a terrible storm swept out from it. Ding Tong and the other people who were present in the surrounding couldn't withstand it. So, they moved aside in order to avoid being injured by this terrifying astral wind. Gong Yin-jia had been blown away by the tremendous impact of this collision. He trod several steps in the space, and then finally stopped. Every step that he took caused ripples in the space, as if it were a water surface. Yi Shiwen seized this opportunity to rush towards black-robed old Ian. A big hand stretched out to grasp black-robed old Ian. It transformed into a big golden hand and grabbed black-robed old Ian. Bang! Yi Shiwen crushed black-robed old Ian in his palm and transformed him into a mass of blood fog. Black-robed old Ian had died screaming, and his flesh and soul had been absorbed by the heavenly source mirror. Yi Shiwen turned around to look for Gong Yin-jia. However, Gong Yin-jia had abandoned black-robed old Ian. He had transformed into a streamer of light and had disappeared into the depths of the tomb. Gong Yin-jia had realized that he couldn't stop Yi Shiwen, so he knew that black-robed old Ian's death was certain. He also knew that he wouldn't have been able to escape from Yi Zaiwen's hands if he had delayed even a bit. "Yi Shiwen, you wait for me. I won't let you off." Gong Yin-jia's hoarse and sharp roar came from the passage inside tomb. It seemed from his voice that he hadn't entirely given up. He hadn't expected that he would be defeated in this fight. However, he had lost at the hands of this boy whom he had underestimated since the beginning. Yi Shiwen thought for a moment, but he eventually decided against pursuing him. His faint feeling of making the breakthrough had become increasingly intense by now. Moreover, his fighting strength would leap to the Sage Accomplished realm if he made the breakthrough into Sage Peak realm. And Gong Yin-jia would be as insignificant as fleeting clouds in front of his absolute strength at that time. So, it wouldn't matter what kind of tricks he would come up with. Yi Shiwen had dropped the idea of pursuing him after this thought had come across his mind. Anyway, he would meet him inside this tomb sooner or later, and he would settle his matter at that time. "What are you going to do now?" Yi Shiwen looked at everyone and asked. His words contained a faint oppression, especially for Yu Rue. After all, Yi Shiwen knew that Yu Rue had a tacit understanding with Gong Yin-jia. Moreover, Yu Rue also had an understanding with Mo Jun, whom he himself had brought. "Well, obviously follow your commands." Yu Rue had no choice but to bow under such formidable and oppressive power. He was certainly arrogant. However, he wasn't someone who wouldn't recognize the current situation. Black-robed old Ian had died, and Gong Yin-jia had escaped in desperation. So, Only Yishuin was left. Yishuin felt pleased with his reply. He wasn't worried that Yurue would play tricks behind his back. So he said, "Very well. However, I don't want to stay in this team after this fight. So, you're on your own." Yi Zaiwen's words shook these few experts. Everyone apart from Ding Tong exposed a pleasantly surprised expression. After all, they were also outstanding talents of their generation, who would want to obey the commands of an overlord, who would like to be treated as petty and low-profile servants. Nobody wanted that. Gong Yanjia had left, and Yi Shiwen also wanted to leave. This was a very good thing. The strength of their small team would undoubtedly decline enormously after the departure of these two powerful men. However, they could act more freely now. Yi Shiwen knew what they were thinking. He knew that they were eagerly waiting for him to leave. However, he must now look for a place to undergo closed-door training. He was also suspicious about these teammates who didn't get along well with each other. It would be hilarious if they came to him at their most critical time. Yi Shiwen flew towards the depths of the tomb after leaving the team. He killed many zombies which were scattered in the passage on his way. Soon, he found a secluded hall in a remote corner. He laid out layer upon layer of barriers at this place. In addition, Yi Mo was personally keeping watch. So, Yi Shiwen set his mind at rest and began the closed-door practice. After that, Yi Shiwen started to operate the real elemental energy and the observing person scripture inside his body. Endless negative energies got converted into spirit energies within a few breaths. They then got absorbed by him. His aura also began to grow crazily. Endless number of negative evil energies transformed into spirit energies to satisfy Yi Zaiwen's urge. And this helped him to promote his power unhindered. It seemed as if Yi Zaiwen's entire body had transformed into a universe, and he was the only god sitting at the center of it. He was the one who had evolved this universe. His golden divinities crawled over his entire body, and his entire body turned golden. He looked solemn and serene. He looked like the image of a golden god from afar. Time passed day by day, and 3 months' time passed in an instant. The pores all over Yi Zaiwen's body were opening and closing unceasingly inside the secluded hall. He was breathing with his pores and was unceasingly absorbing the negative energies. He was transforming negative energies into spirit energies and was then moving them to his dantian. He had repeated this process again and again for the last 3 months, without stopping for even a moment. It wasn't known how many times he had tried to break the threshold, but he had finally reached the limit at this time. Consequently, he broke past it in one fell swoop. Bang! The negative energies started to enter Yi Zaiwen's body at a much faster speed. They were being immediately absorbed by him. His strong and majestic aura suddenly rushed up. It wasn't known how much stronger it had become than before. Yi Shiwen opened his eyes and let out a smile from the corner of his mouth. He had finally entered the Sage Peak realm. To be continued. Chapter 563. Things hadn't quietened down in these 3 months. The situation had become even more intense, on the contrary. Many other people had obtained news about this tomb and had arrived here. The news about Sacred Spring of Life had also gradually spread out, and the arrival of a large number of experts had made the entire situation even more chaotic. An increasing number of people had rushed over here in the last 3 months. However, many people had died as well. In addition, the zombies had begun to appear more frequently at this place. The zombies had smelled the auras of the large number of powerful human experts and demon beasts that had arrived here, and this had awakened them from their long slumber. The losses had also increased with time. However, the experts hadn't given up and left the place as they hadn't yet obtained the most important thing, the Sacred Spring of Life. They were still looking for that thing that had made them go crazy. Tangkin was most likely to find the Sacred Spring of Life, but he hadn't obtained the news yet. This was because he had to focus on evading the many experts that were tracking him. This place used to open very occasionally, but it had attracted many experts still. Yi Shiwen had been laying low for the past 3 months. However, it was time for him to move into action. He had planned to find Tangkin in order to obtain the map of this tomb from him, just like many other people. Yi Shiwen retracted the barrier formations that he had laid out. His principles looked intertwined and deeply rooted. They were firmly entrenched inside his body, just like the roots of an old tree. Every principle was exceptionally thick and tough. Every strand showed his understanding of the associated principles. He possessed 9,999 Tao principles at the moment. It seemed now that his one fist could have crushed star. He had absorbed an endless amount of negative energy in these 3 months closed-door training. His foundation had strengthened as a result. Moreover, his body had enormously tempered as well. His body had made a huge progress because of this training. This was a pleasant surprise. The toughness of his body had promoted enormously after he had practiced the tyrant body to the 7th layer. And now it had again become even more difficult for him to advance a step further. He hadn't expected that the negative energy would help him in practicing the tyrant body technique. He had always understood that cultivating tyrant body technique was bound to be difficult for him. This represented the so-called saying when the heavens confer the duty of capitalizing on an opportunity upon a person, they must first suffer from their own aspirations. He could have considered this place as his other home if the zombies weren't running amok and unknown things weren't buried here. The zombies had touched the edges of this secluded hall several times in these 3 months. Fortunately, Yi Shiwen had laid out the matrix formations. Therefore, he could isolate his aura and prevent those zombies from sensing it. Making a breakthrough to the 8th layer of tyrant body technique would no longer be a dream if I were to practice here for a few years, Yi Shiwen said. However, he didn't think about it further. It was out of the question for him to practice at this place, even though his mental state had become very strong. After all, this place was densely packed with zombies. Yi Shiwen, your body has become so powerful now. But you are still dissatisfied? Yimo said. You will have to wait until you have touched the edge of the Great Sage Realm if you want to make the breakthrough into the 8th layer of tyrant body technique. It will be possible only then. Yi Shiwen was startled by this. However, Yimo's words were reasonable nonetheless. He needed a huge amount of spirit energies if he wanted to temper his body and advance at the same time. However, it was impossible for him to absorb so much spirit energies at present. It would become possible only after he had touched the edge of the Great Sage Realm. However, there was hardly any person in the Sage Realm that could make him frown. And that's because he had entered the 7th layer tyrant body technique now. However, the most important thing right now is to plunder the treasures that are buried and concealed inside this tomb. After all, these treasures are equivalent to boundless wealth, and they are very important for your cultivation. Yimo continued. Yes. Yi Shiwen nodded. He had also thought so. His cultivation couldn't remain limited to his current level. He had to promote himself to the legends in the future. He had to make the breakthrough into the Great Sage Realm. His cultivation's journey was endless, so he was more dependent upon these external resources than other people. It would have certainly been much more difficult for him to make a breakthrough if he didn't have the assistance of these external resources. In fact, he wouldn't have been able to make such an aggressive progress if he hadn't been getting lucky with regards to these external resources. Therefore, he had never avoided collecting external objects. The so-called saying wealth is merely a worldly possession didn't apply to Yi Shiwen, whose cultivation depended on this wealth. This was more so in a place like this. Yi Ziwen's martial power would progress quickly as long as he had enough spirit stones. Likewise, his inner realm would also progress quickly. Both of these progresses were directly proportional and complementary. It wasn't like other people's progresses where they would have to stop to consolidate their newly attained inner realm after having promoted to a particular stage. This was his biggest advantage, and he obviously wanted to make full use of it. Yi Shiwen entered the tunnel of the tomb immediately after he came out of the secluded hall where he had been sitting. It was pitch black in the tunnel, and the negative energy was present everywhere. However, he could see everything clearly as if it was daytime. This darkness was nothing for him. Yi Shiwen had barely come out when he found the zombies wandering outside. All of them were at Sage Realm. They looked extremely fierce and tough. This tomb might have been the abode of a great person when they were alive. It had many halls, and a large number of magical items and heavenly treasures were present in those halls. Yi Shiwen searched all the halls one by one. He plundered everything. There had been many zombies guarding these halls. However, it hadn't been a problem for Yi Shiwen. He had dealt with all of them with ease. He had also met some people who wanted to rob him during this time. However, Yi Shiwen was no ordinary person. He had easily killed all the people who had been planning on robbing him. However, these magical items and heavenly treasures weren't the main thing. The main thing was that sacred spring of life. The majority of people had arrived for it. They wouldn't have rushed over here from distant parts for anything else. It was the most precious thing. That tomb chamber had to be in the depths of the tomb. Therefore, he needed to penetrate deep inside the tomb in order to reach there. He continued to collect wealth as he ventured deeper into the tomb. An increasing number of zombies were present inside these passages. Suddenly, a loud roar came from afar. It was a screechy roar that was unique to the dead beings. It was a zombie. Yi Shiwen hadn't thought much when a red zombie suddenly appeared at a distant place. Its entire body was red, as if it had been set on flames. Ding Tong and her team were in front of this zombie. This was the same team Yi Shiwen had separated away from 3 months ago. However, only Ding Tong and Xiao Yuan were left in that small team. Other people were gone. The two hadn't been on good terms with each other in the past. However, they looked to be getting along well at this time. It seemed as if Ding Tong had seen a savior when she had seen Yi Shiwen arriving. A kind of hope flickered in her eyes. She yelled, "Yi Shiwen, thank God it's you." Both of them immediately rushed towards Yi Shiwen. However, he didn't have time to talk with them. He was staring at the big zombie in front of him with his flashing eyes. Whoosh! The zombie covered a massive distance in an instant and arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. It was dressed up in ancient clothes. Its clothes looked worn out. The human that it had once been had died inside this tomb. Subsequently, he had transformed into a terrifying zombie. However, it wasn't clear how many years ago that had happened. Nonetheless, it was a monster of sage, accomplished realm. It was extremely formidable. It was holding a big sword that was almost taller than its body. His gloomy and frantic aura was firmly locked upon Yi Shiwen. Its cultivation looked nearly the same as it was when it had been alive. Human, you have intruded into my territory. You will bring about your own doom, the zombie said in a low and muffled voice. His hoarse voice sounded as if a sharp blade was being scratched on a glass. Clang! A metal clanging sound was heard as an incomparably sharp sword light slashed down on Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen immediately raised his hand and caught that sword light. Ding! Ripples of light waves formed on Yi Shiwen's palm. A sound like that of the bell of a big clock proliferated. It was like the sound of bombardment of metals. Yi Shiwen felt as if his arm had become slightly numb. He became secretly startled as a result. The toughness of these zombies' bodies increased to a dreadful extent after death, regardless of whether they had been humans or demon beasts or some other race when they had been alive. These zombies were extremely dreadful even when they depended solely upon their bodies. However, they could even challenge the ancient devil god once they transformed into drought demons. Suddenly, the yin energy in the entire tunnel began to surge turbulently. That senior zombie shouted loudly and attacked Yi Shiwen once again. That big sword looked just like a cavalry sword. It seemed that it could behead even an exceptional ominous beast in one slash. Yi Shiwen shot a backhanded punch. A big star suddenly collided with that sword light, which was surging forth. And this collision gave rise to an explosion. Bang! The sword light got crushed and faded away. Human, how can you have such a powerful body? A look of disbelief flashed in the dark green eyes of that zombie. This zombie had already attained spiritual wisdom. However, it was still being constricted inside this tomb. But it's also a good thing. I may be able to move a step forward and break away from this damn cage if I absorb the incredible vitality from your body. The zombie issued a ghastly sound as it looked at Yi Shiwen. Its eyes were brimming with brutality. It seemed as if it was looking at a delicious dish. Afterwards, I will transform your corpse into a zombie, and then further transform that zombie into my puppet. Then, I will insert your soul into that puppet, and keep you as my slave forever. You are overreaching yourself. Yi Shiwen disdainfully smiled. Then, a sword in tension began to condense into a big sword in his hand. This sword wasn't inferior to the big sword that was in that zombie's hand. After all, it had condensed from Yi Zaiwen's own understanding of sword art. He had just reached the peak of Sage Realm. Therefore, he was truly dying to fight at this time. You've long been dead, and still you're causing trouble for people. I will send you on your way to afterlife. Yi Zaiwen's blazing eyes were glaring at that zombie. He unleashed his entire Bodis imposing aura just like a mighty wave, absolutely unrestrained. He had let it all out. To be continued. Chapter 564. He has become even stronger. Xiao Yuan saw Yi Zaiwen's godlike figure. He wasn't very tall and lofty, but he looked full of power and grandeur nonetheless, as if he had become an immortal. However, Ding Tong's countenance looked complicated as she nodded. She had also noticed that Yi Shiwen had become more powerful. He had transformed significantly as compared to how he was 3 months ago. In fact, they could even feel Yi Zaiwen's suppressive power upon themselves. They felt as if they would be exploded by his one punch. 3 months ago, they needed to look up in order to see his existence. However, they couldn't even his figure if they looked up now. Buried Heaven's sword. Yi Shiwen didn't have time to think about what these two women were thinking. He had his eyes focused on that zombie. He shouted loudly and brandished his long sword. And the sword pressure spread in all directions. It seemed as if the entire world was emitting endless buzzing sounds under the suppressive power of his long sword. Clang! 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 The long sword transformed into a huge sword light in the space above. Then it slashed out towards that zombie the next moment. The sword light pierced through the space and arrived in front of that zombie. The corpse energy that was protecting the body of that zombie looked trivial in front of Yi Zaiwen's sword light. It seemed as if this sword light could split open the world and eliminate the heaven. It was evident that the protection on the zombie's body would have been breached and shattered in a split second under this attack's might. The zombie became startled in its heart, and it immediately issued the strongest move that it knew when it used to be alive. Ghost Code! The zombie shouted. Endless corpse energies suddenly burst out and proliferated in the surroundings. It seemed that they would break the world as they swept out towards Yi Zaiwen's sword light. Bang! 2 dreadful forces collided in midair, and the shock waves retracted towards both individuals. However, Yi Shiwen didn't budge. His legs were rooted to the ground. They seemed to have settled like the roots of an old tree. Apparently, he wasn't fazed even a bit. However, that zombie retreated repeatedly under this impact force. In fact, it had become impossible for it to gain a firm footing. Its eyes revealed an extremely shocked look. Its most powerful weapon was its body since it was a zombie. It had never fallen into a disadvantageous position while facing an opponent of the same level. However, the body he had been immensely proud of had become worthless in front of Yi Shiwen. In fact, it had become a joke. Ding Tong and Xiao Yuan shot a glance at each other. They saw the astonished look in each other's eyes. This zombie had been chasing them for so long, so they naturally knew how powerful it was. In fact, it could be considered as frightening. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been forced into such a distressed situation by its chase. However, this fierce monster looked nothing in front of Yi Shiwen. It had been easily repelled by him. It had been repulsed during the competition of physical strength. Just how tough had Yi Zaiwen's body become? It could repel zombies now? Yi Shiwen had been missing for the last few months, and he had reached to a terrifying level during this time. A few months' time could be considered as rather long for ordinary people. However, it was as good as a moment for the experts, especially for the outstanding experts of Sage Realm. How could this not have shocked them? Yi Shiwen hadn't planned to let off this zombie. He suddenly went a step forward, and the golden light flashed and rushed to the front of the zombie in an instant. The sword potential of the buried heaven sword hadn't decreased. It proceeded to crush the zombie. Die for me. This zombie wasn't going to let Yi Shiwen kill him. It went all out this time. It roared as the entire corpse energy of its body condensed into a country of zombies in the surroundings. There weren't any other creatures in this country. Only the zombies were running amok everywhere. This was the world of zombies. This world of zombies had appeared out of nowhere without any warning sign. It had suppressed this world. It seemed that the entire world had transformed into a zombie country. Countless zombies were supplying their magical powers in this zombie country. Everything would cease to exist in the face of this mighty force. Everything looked powerless in front of it. It seemed that this zombie had already visualized Yi Shiwen dying at its hands. Its face exposed a grim, smiling expression, and it let out a sinister laugh through its red lips. You damned human. Enjoy the flavor of the advent of corpses. The negative energies were present in abundance at this place. They could be considered as the spirit energies of this passage, and they combined with the corpse energies immediately after the advent of the world of zombies. Ding Tong and Xiao Yuan had no choice but to promptly increase the thickness of the protective layers of real elemental energy on their bodies. Otherwise, they would have been poisoned to death by these corpse energies. These zombies could be considered as downright poisonous beings. Every muscle and every drop of blood in their bodies was poisonous. They were extremely toxic. Moreover, the more ferocious a zombie was, the more poisonous it would be. In fact, this was also a means of self-protection for these zombies. Is that all you've got? Yi Shiwen shouted. Then his golden divinities began to surge as if they had been enraged by the surrounding corpse energies. His divinities had begun to boil all of a sudden, and the positive yang power spread out. It was the strongest power in the world. It seemed as if a country of gods had been formed as a result. Countless different venerable gods started to chant scriptures that had existed since ancient times inside this country of gods. This country of countless gods condensed into a god's kingdom and collided with the zombies' kingdom, which had been descending from above. Rumble! Two entirely different countries, two entirely different worlds collided at this moment. And then the two opposing forces eroded each other. A chief zombie tried to crawl into the god's kingdom from the zombie's kingdom. However, those powerful golden gods in the god's kingdom killed that zombie and didn't let it approach. It seemed that countless reincarnations had taken place in that instant. Countless zombies had been killed by the gods, and many gods had been ripped apart and devoured whole by the zombies. Ding Tong and Xiao Yuan trembled with fear as they saw this scene. They felt as if they were witnessing the end of the world, the twilight of the gods. However, they had also realized that it was not real. Instead, it was the visualizations of the martial arts of the two individuals that were competing and engulfing each other in order to determine who would fail to resist first. The situation seemed to have reached a stalemate. Ding Tong and Xiao Yuan couldn't decide who would win and who would be torn apart. They just hoped that Yi Shiwen would win. After all, the consequences would be too horrible for them if Yi Shiwen lost. However, they didn't get much time to think as Yi Shiwen suddenly let out a cold cry. He then stepped forth, and a golden wave surged out. Countless gods organized an army inside his golden god's kingdom and entered the zombies' kingdom with an intention to kill. Bang! The zombies' kingdom broke down under the attacks of the countless gods, and the golden light illuminated the entire passage of the tomb. Poof! That zombie spouted a mouthful of green blood. Its strong and robust body went backwards while flying upside down. Cracks appeared on its body as a result. Its green blood gushed out of those cracks and poisoned the air in the surroundings. Also, a sizzling-like sound echoed. This is not possible. My corpse body should be invincible. That zombie couldn't believe that it had been defeated by an ordinary expert of Sage Peak Realm. In fact, it seemed as if there had been no suspense about this outcome during the course of the entire fight. After all, it hadn't had the power to fight back throughout the fight. Humph! Invincible? Don't be so full of yourself. Yi Shiwen coldly snorted. He then brandished his fist. It transformed into an incomparably large star. The huge star suppressed the world as it slammed down towards the zombie in order to crush it. Bang! The zombie didn't get enough time to escape. The fist power struck it, and its body crumbled like paper even though it was supposed to be incomparably tough. It had been destroyed and reduced to ash. Ding Tong and Xiao Yuan came over to express their gratitude when they saw that Yi Shiwen had killed this zombie. Yi Shiwen waved his hand as if it was no big deal. He then frowned and said, "How has it come to pass that only 2 of you have remained? Have the other people died?" He felt pity in his heart. Everyone in that small team had undoubtedly possessed ulterior motives. However, he had collaborated with them for a while. Therefore, he felt pity for them. However, it wasn't a surprise that they had perished in battle. After all, this place was densely packed with zombies. Sage Great Perfection level experts were undoubtedly formidable. However, it wouldn't matter how formidable they were if they were to meet a strong zombie like this one. They could only manage to escape in such a situation. In fact, they could even die in the fight if they weren't careful. "No, we have been framed." Xiao Yuan gritted her teeth and said. She was looking at Yi Shiwen as if she considered him the team's pillar. She wasn't looking at him as if he was as an eyesore, the way she had looked at him initially. She had never said anything specifically against Yi Shiwen. She had been targeting Ding Tong back then, and Yi Shiwen had been taken along to ride with her. It could be said that he had been unjustly attacked. "What happened?" Yi Shiwen asked. "It's Gong Yin Jia." Xiao Yuan spoke out a name that startled Yi Shiwen. Her words were filled with resentment. "Also, Yu Rue. He carried us into a trap established by Gong Yin Jia. He alarmed that sage accomplished level zombie, which was in deep sleep. It woke up and attacked us. Gu Tian died fighting. We also nearly got killed. Yi Shiwen, you must avenge us." Xiao Yuan had included Yi Shiwen into their group as if it was the most obvious thing. "Gong Yin Jia hasn't died yet?" Yi Shiwen was somewhat surprised. Gong Yin Jia had sustained serious injuries at his hands. Still, he hadn't died at this place which was brimming with zombies, and had returned to retaliate. This was beyond his expectations. It's true, Gong Yin Jia hasn't died. Moreover, his power has increased enormously. In fact, I should say that he has recovered his enormous power. Ding Tong was standing nearby. It was she who had replied this time. The fact is that Gong Yin Jia had already reached the sage accomplished realm earlier. However, he had lost a fight with someone, and his cultivation realm had dropped as a result. He has arrived at this place because he wanted to find the magical things that could restore his power. Now, he has found it, and his power has been restored to the peak. In fact, it has increased even further. Ding Tong's words had surprised Yi Shiwen. It's no wonder that Gong Yin Jia was so strong. He was far more powerful than an ordinary sage great perfection level expert. But it turns out that he had declined from the sage accomplished realm, so he would naturally have been different. Moreover, he had merely been wary when I had revealed my tyrannical strength in front of him. He hadn't been terrified. Clearly, he had been waiting to find the divine things that he needed to restore his martial power. And that was because he would be able to treat me like an ant once he had restored his strength, just like he treated other people. To be continued. Chapter 565. There was a great disparity between Sage Great Perfection Realm and Sage Accomplished Realm. Therefore, it could be said that Gong Yin Jia didn't have so much confidence without any reason. It was just that he had miscalculated Yi Zaiwen's strength. He had repeatedly underestimated him, and finally had to escape after sustaining serious injuries. Moreover, black-robed old Ian had been killed by Yi Shiwen. He simply hadn't anticipated this. Yi Shiwen hadn't cared too much about Gong Yin Jia in the beginning. He only needed to wait until he had made the breakthrough into the Sage Peak realm. After all, he wouldn't need to worry about Gong Yin Jia thereafter. However, it suddenly seemed that it wouldn't be that easy to kill Gong Yin Jia. Yi Shiwen wasn't afraid of his threats. However, he found him rather disgusting. "Do you know where he is now?" Yi Shiwen asked. He thought to ask about Gong Yin Jia's location so that he could go and kill him at first. He didn't have such a big enmity with Gong Yin-jia that he would want to kill him. However, he couldn't tolerate someone scheming against him behind his back. Such an enemy was best eliminated. The two women shook their heads. They didn't know where Gong Yin-ji and his team had gone to after they had escaped from them. So, they didn't know about the current whereabouts of Gong Yin-jia, Yu Rui, and Mo Jun. Then, you follow me, I'll find and kill all three of them. Then, all of us will feel relieved. Yi Shiwen said. The women had been seeking for help. They couldn't say that they would be able to defend themselves inside this extremely dangerous tomb, despite the fact that they had the strength of Sage Great Perfection Realm. However, the situation was completely different now, since they had Yi Shiwen by their side. After all, they had just witnessed Yi Zaiwen's insane strength. He had defeated a senior zombie of Sage accomplished realm with just a few moves. They would be much safer now that Yi Shiwen was escorting them. Basically, there wouldn't be any problem in escaping unless a group of Sage accomplished level experts attacked them from all sides. The women introduced Yi Shiwen to the situation of the last 3 months after they came to know that he had been undergoing closed-door training for the past 3 months. Yi Shiwen had probed the situation of the outside world with the help of his divine sense while he was in the closed-door training. However, he could obtain only a little bit of information. It was far less than the details that these two women had provided him. The search for the sacred spring of life had progressed to some extent, but this matter should have ended very quickly. After all, Tankin should have obtained a great advantage because of the map that he had. However, things had turned out differently. He came inside the tomb and realized that his map was of no use. It was because the location of the sacred spring of life had changed. However, it hadn't been shifted by the people. Instead, it had shifted by itself. Some people guessed that the sacred spring of life moved on its own from time to time, and it wouldn't be easy to tell where it had migrated this time. In fact, this was a solid guess since the spiritual items could feel dangers by themselves and could hence move around. There was even a saying in this regard, the spiritual items have spiritual awareness. Therefore, this wasn't an uncommon phenomenon. Consequently, Tankin had lost his advantage even though he possessed the map. Therefore, he had also made only a little progress. However, the main thing was the direction. Everything would go smoothly once the direction was determined. In fact, it would take a month's time at most to find the whereabouts of the sacred spring of life after the direction was determined. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt that there was a bit of problem. It wasn't that easy to find Gong Yin-jia in 1 month. He obviously wasn't worried that Gong Yin-jia would have escaped by now. After all, Gong Yin-jia definitely wouldn't escape until the sacred spring of life got unveiled. It could be said that Gong Yin-jia might have avoided Yi Shiwen when he was at the Sage Great Perfection Realm. However, he had restored his cultivation to Sage Accomplished Realm now. So, it would be strange if he were to escape. After all, his incomparably domineering personality wouldn't allow him to do so. Gong Yin-jia would surely appear when the sacred spring of life showed up. His domineering and arrogant personality wouldn't allow him to be afraid of anybody now that he had reached the Sage Accomplished Realm again. And Yi Shiwen wouldn't underestimate him by thinking that he wouldn't strive for the sacred spring of life. Yi Shiwen would have to wait until the sacred spring of life showed up if he couldn't find Gong Yin-jia in this 1 month. He must uproot the main cause of trouble at that time. Gong Yin-jia harbored extreme hatred and resentment towards him, and it wasn't in Yi Zaiwen's nature to allow such a hostile enemy to roam freely and unfettered. However, Yi Shiwen couldn't find his whereabouts in this 1 month. Perhaps Yi Zaiwen's luck wasn't good, or Gong Yin-jia's luck was too good. The matter regarding Sacred Spring of Life became increasingly lively as the time passed day by day. An increasing amount of news began to spread out. In fact, some news was spread out almost every day. Yi Shiwen had unceasingly collected the left-behind treasures in this 1 month. Many people had arrived in this tomb while he was in the closed-door training for 3 months. Therefore, he couldn't obtain too many treasures. However, it was still better than nothing. Moreover, everyone's focus wasn't on these treasures. Their attention was fixed on the sacred spring of life which hadn't appeared yet. Someone finally found this long-awaited sacred spring of life. They had found a small stream of spring water that was flowing out from inside a secret room. It was a very thin line of water. However, it had still been discovered. This news spread out, and it instantly caused a huge sensation among the experts that were present inside the tomb. Everyone rushed to that place in the tomb. Yishuan also did so. However, he didn't show his face out in the open. Instead, he took the two women along with him and stood on the side. He was highly skilled in his restraining breath technique. Therefore, nobody would be able to see him even if he were to mix in with the crowd. They would have ignored him even if they walked past him. Someone could have noticed him only if they already knew his exact position. In common terms, he had become invisible after restraining his very presence. Things hadn't even begun to take shape at this time. So, he didn't want to become too impulsive by acting in advance. Yishuan saw that thin stream of sacred spring of life. He couldn't help but sigh. It was apparent that an exceptionally bitter struggle would take place soon. It was clear from the flow of that spring water that there wasn't much spring water inside. In fact, it might be enough for just one person. However, many people had arrived here. Therefore, he was sure that a bitter struggle would take place when the time would come. This point was also visible from Tang Kan's case. He wouldn't have needed to arrive here if his elder brother had extra spring water. After all, this venture would have been a needless risk in that case. Therefore, it was clear that his elder brother must not have taken away a huge amount of the spring water. There was no scope of negotiation. The treasure was enough for only one person, and all these people were ambitious and thriving. Some of them might not be looking for making progress. They might have also let it go if it were ordinary stuff. After all, sage accomplished level experts weren't easy to handle. However, how could they possibly give up on a magical treasure that could help in making the breakthrough into the great sage realm? Even Yishuan wouldn't give up. He had to get hold of it. He had a premonition that it would be more difficult for him to make the breakthrough into the great sage realm as compared to an ordinary person. So, the sacred spring of life would be a big help for him. It could help him in making the breakthrough into great sage realm. It might play a crucial role in his future. Yimo had also advised him not to give up. Therefore, he wouldn't give up. Talking things out would be pointless in this situation. There was only one way: fight and find out who has the biggest fist. And the winner would get the sacred spring of life. Obviously, it wasn't only Yishuan who could see this thing. It's so meager in quantity. I reckon that not many people would be able to obtain it even if the room opened. It may be just enough for one person's use. This matter will definitely cause a bloodbath. However, I must obtain the sacred spring of life no matter what. I'm already 1,500 years old. I will enter the condition of 5 signs of death if I don't make the breakthrough soon. They'll have no other choice at that time but to die in a seated posture. Many of these people look middle-aged or young. However, only they themselves knew about the kind of situation they were in. The so-called phase of 5 signs of death would certainly arrive one day in a person's life. High cultivation would be of no use in that case unless one made another breakthrough. It would be too late for everything if one waited until the arrival of 5 signs of death phase of their life. The human bodhi's function would rapidly deteriorate after entering into the 5 signs of death phase, and it would be 100 times more difficult to make the breakthrough at that time. One could only sit and wait for their death if they entered this phase. Some people had found a way out of it. They had made the breakthrough once again after entering this phase. However, there was a very small possibility of this happening. The people who had entered this phase weren't on the verge of death yet. However, there wasn't any difference either. After all, they had reached a condition where there was nothing they wouldn't dare to do. And such people were obviously capable of going to insane lengths. Most people didn't want to annoy these people, and Yishuan was no exception. However, Yishuan didn't have any other choice at this time. Bang! A formidable aura arrived from a distant place. This person was none other than Tang Kan. He had finally appeared. Yishuan had found out about him just before he appeared. He was the one who had stirred up this matter in the first place. So, he would naturally arrive at this time. The Juyan ape, the Silver Eagle King, and that young man dressed in large white clothes also arrived one after another soon after Tankin appeared. These 4 experts didn't delay after arriving. They immediately bombarded the entire gate. The other experts also attacked this gate one after another. Everyone understood the fact that they could get the opportunity to obtain the sacred spring of life only if they blasted this gate. Therefore, everyone was working together, at least for the time being. Yishuan also attacked. However, his divine sense was wandering in the surroundings at the same time. He had to find Gong Yin Jia's whereabouts. And he didn't believe that Gong Yin Jia would have restrained himself from coming out here. Not too much time had passed when Yishuan found Gong Yin Jia and his team. They were hiding in a corner, and they had even restrained their presence. In fact, they were almost hidden inside that subspace. Gong Yin Jia was also a very cunning person. He had restrained himself from attacking at present. He would move into action when those 4 sage, accomplished level experts could be caught off guard. However, Yishuan had the same idea, and he had found Gong Yin Jia. Gong Yin Jia wanted to be the Oriole behind the mantis. However, he had instead become a mantis himself. Both of you will wait here until this gate opens. Defend yourselves, but don't attack. Otherwise, I won't be able to protect you. Yishuan said. He was going to attack with his entire strength and fight for the sacred spring of life. And he wouldn't be able to turn back to help these 2 women if they also got involved. The 2 nodded. Both of them were experts of the sage, great perfection realm. So, it wouldn't be easy to kill them if they focused on defending themselves. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's voice hadn't even faded when a loud explosion occurred. He then heard someone shouting, "The gate is opened. Begin!" To be continued. Chapter 566. The stone gate couldn't withstand everyone's combined attack and exploded. A burst of boundless corpse energy proliferated out and formed clouds of corpse energy inside the tomb. It looked especially gloomy and terrifying. Yishuan, don't rush to the front. I have a bad feeling about this. There seems to be something inside that's making me restless. Yimo said. Yishuan hadn't planned to be at the front. However, his desire to rush to the front reduced even further after hearing Yimo's warning. He frowned. Who could be lurking inside this ghostly place? Could it be a 10,000 years old corpse king or something? Yishuan somewhat shuddered with fear as he made the guess. No matter what was inside, it had to have undergone a drastic transformation if it had any relation with being 10,000 years old. Moreover, the corpse energies were terrifying here. It wasn't clear how much richer the corpse energy here was as compared to the outside world. This was the most dreadful thing. Some ominous things might breed in such an environment. However, the other people hadn't thought this. So, they rushed in one after another. After all, they were afraid that they might not be able to grab the sacred spring of life if they slowed down. Everyone present here was a martial arts expert. Their footsteps didn't slow down even a bit. They burst into the depths of the room within a moment. They then saw the corpse energy that was spread throughout this forbidden area. It looked like a completely different world. The cave's roof was several hundred meters high from the ground. The cave was incomparably spacious. However, the majority of the area inside was concealed in darkness. The presence of strong corpse energies had blocked everyone's eyesight. Yishuan was behind everyone. He heard the commotion coming from front. I found the sacred spring of life. It wasn't known who had shouted, but everyone began to push forward. Yishuan got mixed in the crowd. He saw that the giant-sized Silver Eagle King had grabbed a fist-sized lump of liquid in his claws. The liquid was wrapped up in a sphere that was emitting sparkling and translucent rays of light. Everyone's gaze was fixed on it. They knew that this must be the sacred spring of life that was mentioned in legends. And the Silver Eagle King had seized it. Put down the sacred spring of life. Damn beast! Everyone abused endlessly. All kinds of attacks swept out towards the Silver Eagle King at the same time. They didn't care about anything at this time. After all, the Silver Eagle King would take away that thing if they didn't attack. Chirp! A loud chirping sound echoed at this moment. and endless rays of silver light emitted from the body of the Silver Eagle King and wrapped him up. He looked like a huge sculpture casted with silver. Bang! 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 Those attacks bombarded on the body of the Silver Eagle King one after another. However, they were blocked off by the silver rays of light on its body. Suddenly, the Silver Eagle King turned into a silver streamer of light and flew towards the exit. The experts that came in its way got cut into two halves. He attacked relentlessly and without any mercy. "You damn big bird. This sacred spring of life is mine." A pair of red fists slammed down from above like meteors at this moment. Bang! The Silver Eagle King dodged the attack in that crucial moment, and a big hole made of some unknown material was opened in the floor. The Silver Eagle King's sharp gaze landed on the Juyin ape at this time. The Juyin ape was hiding in the void. The Silver Eagle King didn't get along with Juyin ape, and it wasn't a thing of 1 or 2 days. The Juyin ape had been constantly opposing him in these past few months. The Juyin ape let out a smile from the corner of its mouth and said, "Big bird, hand it over to me. Otherwise, you won't be able to escape today." "Do you want to collaborate with these humans?" the Silver Eagle King coldly asked. "I just want the sacred spring of life. You don't deserve it. Only this eye-catching king deserves it." The Juyin ape grinned. He wasn't modest by any means. "Bastards, this must be in the hands of this young master," Tankin said angrily. He was very depressed at this time. This thing was supposed to fall into his hands. After all, he had the map. However, he had been forced into competing with everyone in the end. Tankin immediately launched an attack, and a big hand made of spirit energies swept out towards the Silver Eagle King in order to grab him. Everyone else also attacked the Silver Eagle King at this time. Nobody cared about who the opposite party was. They just knew that they might not get anything if they didn't attack. All of them seemed to be blindfolded. They would attack anyone that held the sacred spring of life. Clang! Clang! Bang! All kinds of terrifying sounds were heard. Sounds of explosion reverberated everywhere. Yishuin was behind everyone. However, he didn't hurry to attack. Instead, he was observing calmly. It seemed as if he was moving stealthily in the darkness and was prepared to attack anytime and anywhere. The Silver Eagle King had no choice but to temporarily let go of that ball of sacred spring of life under such a situation. Otherwise, he would be blasted to pieces despite of his strength. Everyone attacked each other. They refused to let the opposite party obtain the opportunity, as all of them wanted to grab that opportunity for themselves. However, nobody could obtain the opportunity while facing everyone's attack. After all, everyone was fighting over it. Bang! A sage great perfection level expert grabbed the sacred spring of life. However, he hadn't even felt happy when he was blasted into pieces. Tankin finally obtained the sacred spring of life amidst the chaos. He then said, "You all get lost. This is mine." Tankin roared angrily. After all, this thing belonged to him, in his opinion, and it had finally fallen into his hands. Clang! A loud metal clanging sound was heard as a dreadful sword light slashed down towards Tankin. It turned out to be that young man who was dressed in spacious white clothes. However, his handsome face was filled with seriousness at this time. Tankin had no choice but to release the sacred spring of life while facing this dreadful sword light. He became extremely depressed as a result. "You mustn't grab it. It belongs to this king." The Juyin ape grinned. He then made a move to grab the sacred spring of life. Suddenly, howl! A dreadful roar of a corpse reverberated inside the dark abyss. This terrifying howl shook the world. Then, a big hairy hand suddenly stretched out towards everyone. A sage small perfection level expert didn't get the time to defend himself and got caught. He screamed as this big hand penetrated his chest and crushed his heart. Blood gushed out from his chest, and he died a tragic death on the spot. "Damn it!" The young man dressed in spacious white clothes shouted loudly. His sword light slashed down and landed on that big hairy hand which had appeared out of the blue. Clang! The sword light couldn't cut down that big hairy hand. On the contrary, it issued a metal clanging sound. The hand didn't stop even a bit. Instead, it swept towards that young man dressed in spacious clothes in order to grab him. The sound of breaking of space reverberated as the big hand arrived near that man in an instant. The white-clothed man immediately retreated. He trod in the void, flew hundreds of feet back, and somehow avoided being grasped by this big hand. However, a few sage experts who were behind him weren't so lucky. They were grabbed and exploded on the spot. Everyone had been left dumbstruck by this sudden attack. What the hell is going on? What is this big hand? Some people were already terrified. After all, many formidable sage experts had been grabbed and killed by this hand. What is lurking inside this darkness? Everyone, we mustn't fight amongst ourselves. We must deal with this unknown enemy first. A sage great perfection level expert shouted. Everyone heard this. It indeed made sense. They shouldn't be thinking about whether they will be able to obtain the sacred spring of life or not at this time. Instead, they should be thinking about whether they will be able to save their lives or not. They were fighting for the sacred spring of life so that they could make the breakthrough. Wasn't it essentially to attain a longer lifespan? Therefore, the most important thing was to save their lives first. However, he hadn't even finished speaking when another big and hairy hand came out from the darkness. The big hand grabbed his head and smashed it. Red and white fluid splashed out of his head as a result. Everyone trembled with fear as they saw this scene. What kind of bullshit trickery is this? Show yourself. Let this king see what god or demon you are. The giant ape couldn't tolerate this strange scene. A pair of fists swept out, and endless flames transformed into meteors and fell into the darkness. Those strong corpse energies got burnt and evaporated as a result. Moreover, the boundless darkness reduced significantly. That area had been illuminated under the light of those meteors, and everyone had clearly seen that it was a group of monsters. There were 3 tall zombies inside the room. They were dressed as mediators of 3 different religions. They were dressed as a Taoist priest, a Buddhist monk, and a Confucian scholar, respectively. However, they appeared fiendish. Spears had grown all over their bodies, and their bodies were brimming with a violent aura. Yi Shiwen was standing very far from them. However, even he could feel the thick, deathly miasma from them. Moreover, it seemed that their repressed but incredible power would soon burst out. Each of these zombies was far superior to an average sage, accomplished expert. Even that white-clothed young man had seen no choice but to escape at the last moment in the face of that surprise attack a moment ago. Everyone was terrified. They could feel that the strength of these 3 senior zombies was increasing every moment. They were extremely scary. Suddenly, the dark green eyes of those 3 senior zombies shone. Then, they burst out towards the crowd of experts. Attack! Attack! It wasn't known who had shouted, but it suddenly aroused the morale and aspirations of a lot of powerful experts. They were very afraid of these 3 zombies. However, what other choice did they have under such conditions? They could only put everything on stake and fight together. Many experts attacked together. It could be said that this scene looked incomparably dreadful. A lot of martial arts attacks swept out at once. It was enough to make the blue dome of heaven collapse and fall to the ground. The roars of these monsters and the angry shouts of the experts reverberated inside the cave at this moment. Bang! 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 The incomparably dreadful sounds of explosion reverberated everywhere. Gong Yin Jia had been hidden in the darkness. He finally moved into action at this moment. He had remained hidden for a long time and wait for such an opportunity. So, he finally moved at this time, since he didn't want to miss this opportunity. His hand suddenly became big and swept towards the sacred spring of life to grab it. His face exposed a happy expression as the sacred spring of life was about to fall into his hands. All those schemes of his hadn't gone in vain. Making the breakthrough into the great sage realm would be imminent for him after getting his hands on this sacred spring of life. However, a loud shout came from afar at this moment. Gong Yin Jia, don't even think of doing that. To be continued. Chapter 567. Gong Yin Jia. Don't even think of doing that. A cyan figure suddenly appeared in front of Gong Yin Jia. He stretched out a big hand towards the ball of sacred spring of life to grab it. He then grabbed it and put it inside the heavenly source mirror in front of Gong Yin Jia. Gong Yin Jia was stunned by this. However, his face immediately revealed an angry look, and he shouted, "It's you?" Gong Yin Jia was unwilling to give up on his retaliation towards Yi Shiwen. After all, he had an arrogant and despotic temperament. However, he hadn't acted ostentatiously and showed off his powers everywhere, even after making the breakthrough into the sage accomplished realm. He was waiting for this day to come so that he could succeed in obtaining the sacred spring of life. However, he had been obstructed by Yi Shiwen when the success was only a step away from him, when only a moment was left. And Yi Shiwen had turned out to be his nemesis in this instance as well. His plan of using Yi Shiwen as cannon fodder had been ruined by Yi Shiwen in the beginning. Yi Shiwen had then defeated him and had forced him to escape. And now, he had interfered during this crucial time as well. Gong Yin Jia had finally moved into action because he wanted to take advantage of this time when everyone's attention was fixed on those three zombies. However, he was robbed by Yi Shiwen. His scheme was very profound. However, Yi Xiwen's plan was even deeper. Yi Shiwen had waited for him to act and then intercepted. "Yeah, it's me. It was a good plan. You had restrained yourself until now," Yi Shiwen insipidly replied. "But you couldn't restrain yourself?" Gong Yin Jia said in an ironic tone. Yu Rui and Mo Zhen were beside him. They had become somewhat scared to see Yi Shiwen. Fortunately, they hadn't directly confronted Yi Shiwen earlier. However, they were standing on Gong Yin Jia's side now, and this meant that they were standing against Yi Shiwen. They had seen Ding Tong and Xiao Yuan standing beside Yi Shiwen. They knew now that those two hadn't died back then. However, they felt a bit comfortable when they felt Gong Yin Jia's intrepid aura. "You dared to appear before me?" The expression in Gong Yin Jia's eyes changed and revealed a bitter resentment. The former calm and indifferent expression in his eyes had vanished completely. Yi Shiwen was responsible for this change. After all, how would he have become like this if it wasn't for Yi Shiwen? Why wouldn't I have dared to appear? Yi Shiwen was coldly looking at him. These two great experts suddenly attracted the attention of the majority of the people around. However, nobody was concerned about why these two men had appeared at this time. It was because the bodies of those three zombies were as tough as gold and iron. They weren't afraid of these living things. In fact, they had rushed straight into the humans' battle formation in order to kill them. Bang! The long arms of that Confucian scholar zombie arrived in front of a sage, small perfection level expert. It grabbed that expert with its hands and ripped him apart into two halves. Then, it opened its mouth wide like a sacrificial bowl and swallowed the corpse of that expert. A sage great perfection level expert furiously attacked at this moment. However, the Taoist priest zombie grabbed him with his hand and crushed him to death. Then, it stuffed his mangled corpse into its mouth. This incomparably brutal scene made everyone even more frightened. However, it also made them even more united. They knew that they would also follow in the footsteps of these men if they didn't attack with their entire strength. How can they be so dreadful? They are simply invulnerable. Everyone was terrified. They couldn't believe that such scary monsters existed in the world. These sage experts were considered as domineering in the outside world. They weren't heavyweights like the great sages. However, they could still be regarded as individuals that could run amok in all directions. However, 2 or 3 such experts had been ripped apart by these monsters until now. Moreover, those experts hadn't even been able to muster the power to resist these zombies. So, it was evident that these monsters were way too frightening. It would have made sense if these monsters were great sages. After all, they also knew that there was a huge disparity between them and the great sages. However, they could feel that these monsters hadn't even reached the great sage realm. In fact, they hadn't even reached the half step of great sage realm. They were merely at the sage accomplished realm. This had obviously shoved them in despair. However, it had also given them some hope. Anyway, these zombies weren't great sages. Otherwise, they would have had no choice but to wait for their death with their hands tied. Fortunately, Yi Shiwen warned us a while back not to rush to the front. Otherwise, the consequences would have been too horrible. Ding Tong felt very grateful at this time. She was glad that she had obeyed what Yi Shiwen had told them, and hadn't gotten driven by her greedy mind to rush ahead. Otherwise, she reckoned that she would have also fallen into the hands of these monsters, and gotten devoured by them as a result. The most dreadful thing wasn't being killed by them. These people had killed all the way to this place, and the women were no exception. So, she was used to the sight of killings. However, she couldn't accept being devoured so brutally. It's good that you've appeared, but don't run away now. I have to offer sacrifice with your blood today. Gong Yin Jia cruelly smiled. His imposing aura had reached to the extreme. The tyrannical power of Sage Accomplished Realm had been fully demonstrated. He had reached the Sage Accomplished Realm a long time ago, but he had fallen to the Sage Great Perfection Realm because he had sustained some injuries. However, he had restored his strength now. Moreover, his strength had reached to the peak of the Sage Accomplished Realm in one fell swoop. Consequently, he was confident that nobody could defeat him now. Therefore, he was confident that he could still obtain the sacred spring of life, even if he had to face so many experts. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's vital energy rushed out and formed waves of golden divinities under his feet. Then his entire body became golden. It seemed as if an ancient overlord had been reborn. Then his entire strength burst out. The complexions of the onlookers changed significantly as a result. After all, such power was too terrifying. In fact, his imposing aura didn't differ a bit from that of Gong Yin Jia at this moment. Gong Yin Jia's complexion turned unsightly. He had realized that Yi Shiwen had also advanced by leaps and bounds in the last few months. His cultivation had become unfathomable. He knew that this man was a persistent enemy. But the speed of his progress had surpassed his imagination. However, he didn't think anything else. Gong Yin Jia's strength had restored to the peak. In fact, it had surpassed the peak. So, what if Yi Shiwen had made a breakthrough as well? Gong Yin Jia attacked almost immediately. A big leg suddenly transformed into a giant mountain and slammed down towards Yi Shiwen. Gong Yin Jia had undoubtedly become much more terrifying than before. After all, the martial power of the Peak of Sage Accomplished Realm was unfathomably profound. He had become extremely terrifying after restoring his original strength. So, it was no wonder that he had always been very arrogant and despotic. However, Yi Shiwen also wasn't the person that he used to be a few months ago. His cultivation had also promoted from the late stage of Sage Realm to Sage Realm Peak in the last few months. So, he too had become several times more powerful than earlier. He condensed a Hanzhan seal with his bare hands, and his entire arm transformed into a giant mountain range. It spanned through the air, and suddenly pounded towards Gong Yin Jia's leg. Bang! Two mountains collided in midair. They had been formed of energies, so they ferociously collided into space along with a violent explosion. This was the most intense battle. Both sides had gone all out. Bang! Gong Yin Jia's Sage Tool leg was instantly defeated by Yi Shiwen, even though it had condensed into a mountain. Yi Shiwen had gained an overwhelming advantage from the beginning of the fight, just like the last time. Yi Shiwen then attacked with his entire strength. A fist swept out, transformed into a big star, and fell down. Endless murderous aura splashed out everywhere, and attacked without any hesitation. He had let Gong Yin Jia escape the first time. However, he wouldn't let the tiger return to his den this time. He had completely suppressed Gong Yin Jia. However, he was still incomparably relaxed. In fact, he wasn't giving Gong Yin Jia any room to make a comeback. Bang! Yi Shiwen soundly defeated Gong Yin Jia's counterattack once again. Then he arrived in front of him. Gong Yin Jia's eyes were filled with dread, as well as a determination of not giving up. He was already in his most powerful condition. In fact, he was in an even better condition than his strongest state. However, he still looked vulnerable in front of Yishuan. He didn't have any room to retaliate. He had become depressed after being suppressed like this. In fact, he felt like vomiting blood. Moreover, it seemed that Yi Shiwen was also slowly grasping the power of the sage accomplished realm as the fight was becoming increasingly intense. He had gradually become proficient in using the peak of sage realm to control the fighting power of the sage accomplished realm. In addition, the might of Big Bang Stardust Fist had increased even further. Die! Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. Then, the fist power exploded all the protections on Gong Yanjia's body. It then blasted upon his body once again. Poof! Gong Yanjia spouted a mouthful of blood. His body went out flying upside down. He had been battered to the extent that his body was almost falling apart. Gong Yanjia finally understood that there was a difference of cloud and mud between Yi Shiwen and him. Therefore, he no longer harbored any hopes of beating Yi Shiwen. And Gong Yanjia wasn't going to stay any longer after he had come to realize this. He immediately roared, and the real elemental energy of his entire body began to ignite frantically. He then transformed into a streamer of light and thought to escape from the hands of Yi Shiwen. He didn't care about his two subordinates, Yu Rue and Mo Jun. The most important thing for him at this moment was to escape anyhow. Other people were insignificant in his opinion. He even wished that Yi Shiwen would target them first. This would delay Yi Zaiwen's action against him and would buy him some time to escape. However, how could Yi Shiwen give him such an opportunity? A big golden hand suddenly stretched out. It then transformed into golden clouds and grabbed Gong Yanjia in a claw. Poof! Gong Yanjia was instantly transformed into a mass of blood fog. His soul had also been exterminated. Everyone was left stunned. This much talked about fight should have been outstanding and should have lasted for several days and nights. So, they hadn't anticipated that it would end within such a short span of time. This had instantly terrified many people. Yi Zaiwen's strength had deterred the people who were getting restless to make trouble. After all, some people had seen him snatching that ball of sacred spring of life. So, they had thought that they would snatch it from him. However, would they dare to attack him now that they had witnessed his insane strength? In fact, the thought of robbing the sacred spring of life from Yi Shiwen had vanished from their minds. The battle situation on the other side had entered the most intense stage. People were unceasingly dying at the hands of these three monsters. 1/5 of the experts had perished during the short period of time in which Yi Shiwen had killed Gong Yanjia. These three zombies were like three highly efficient slaughtering machines. They had made everyone's hair stand on end. In fact, everyone had been scared witless. To be continued. Chapter 568. Chapter 568. Go to the side and die. Everyone knew that it would be a dead end if they couldn't deal with these three monsters. All of their efforts would be for naught. Screech, the Silver Eagle King, issued a loud eagle cry and finally moved into action at this time. His wings fluttered and unleashed endless winds. Consequently, a huge tornado swept towards that Buddhist monk zombie who hadn't acted so far. The Buddhist monk zombie roared and summoned a Buddha. A grayish Buddha aura suddenly illuminated the world, and an image of Buddha appeared behind the Buddhist monk zombie. However, this Buddha had fiendish features. It was a corpse Buddha. The corpse Buddha opened his eyes, and it seemed as if the world had sunk into darkness within an instant. Everything seemed to have sunk into the world of zombies. Endless grayish lights swept out and went up towards that tornado in order to tackle it. Rumble! Two dreadful forces suddenly collided in the space. This dreadful collision made the space around the point of collision ripple like the surface of boiling water. The space boiled and frantically distorted. Then, the ripples swept across one after another. The forces of both sides had been routed in midair. Then, the Silver Eagle King moved once again. Silver rays of light burst out from its body in the form of a ring and condensed into a huge falcon in the void. The huge falcon cried loudly and rushed towards the Buddhist monk. Roar! The Buddha that was behind that Buddhist monk zombie roared loudly. He opened his mouth like a sacrificial bowl and stretched out a big black claw towards that huge falcon in order to grab it. Bang! This was a terrifying scene. The big black claw penetrated that huge silver falcon and ripped it apart. Then another big hand stretched out, but disappeared a second later. It seemed as if the hand had penetrated into the space, but it reappeared a moment later. However, it was already in front of the Silver Eagle King this time. Screech! The Silver Eagle King screamed as its wings got torn apart by that big hand. Blood splashed out from his body as a result. The big hand retracted whilst holding the wings. Then, the corpse Buddha opened his mouth like a sacrificial bowl and gobbled up those wings. Everyone trembled with fear as they heard the crunch sound of bones being chewed and crushed by the corpse Buddha. One must know that the Silver Eagle King had cultivated to the pinnacle of sage, accomplished realm. It could be even said that his bones were as hard as steel. However, they had been chewed and crushed by the corpse Buddha with ease. Holy crap! What kind of Fu Asterisk King monster is this? The giant ape couldn't take it anymore. It turned around and escaped. It had no reason to stake its life in a fight with these three monsters. It had already seen the Silver Eagle King fighting with them. Its wings had been torn apart and eaten by the corpse Buddha, even though it was in the form of Silver Eagle King. The giant ape didn't want to see its own limbs torn apart and devoured as well. That would be extremely terrifying. Everyone lost their courage when they saw the Silver Eagle King's wings being shattered by the Buddhist monk zombie. The giant ape had already escaped. Nobody wanted to step forward and throw away their life. Therefore, they flew away in the direction of the gate one after another. The entire troop had gotten dispersed. All of them had rushed towards the exit one after another. Yishuan quickly rushed towards the two women at a rapid speed and said, "Follow me closely. We're leaving." He didn't want to stay here and fight these three monsters either. These three monsters hadn't entered the half-step of Great Sage Realm yet. However, their strength was still unfathomable. It might be possible that they had been suppressed by the rules of Grey Gas Collar. Or they had just woken from an eternal sleep, and this was their weakest time. Yi Shiwen possessed the fighting prowess of a Heaven's Pride expert. Still, he couldn't dare to say that he could defeat them within a short time. Moreover, they would become even more ferocious once they gradually recovered. So, wasn't staying here equivalent to courting death? Boy, hand over my sacred spring of life. Everyone tried to escape at the same time, and thus created a chaotic situation. However, the speed of those three outrageously powerful zombies was much faster than theirs. Therefore, they had to run faster than the other experts to prevent the wrath of those three monsters from falling upon them. A lot of people were thinking this, and Yi Shiwen was no exception. Therefore, the person that was looking for him at such a time could only be Tang Can. After all, he was originally the most promising contender for obtaining the sacred spring of life. This represented the so-called saying the mantis stalks the cicada unaware of the oriole behind it. Tang Can was initially the cicada, and Yi Shiwen became the oriole in the end. Therefore, Tang Can was in a very foul mood when he saw Yi Shiwen at this time. He rushed towards Yi Shiwen and blocked his way by arriving in front of him. "Step aside or die," Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. His hands clenched into fists and blasted away Tang Can's divine beam. It was followed by a slap. Bang! A loud sound of breaking of bones was heard as expected. It was crisp and brutal. However, the result was contrary to everyone's expectations since it wasn't Yi Shiwen who had suffered a loss. Instead, Tang Can had suffered a huge defeat. He had been slapped on his head by Yi Shiwen and had gone out flying as a result. Tang Can had attacked moments ago, but he had already been defeated by Yi Shiwen in an effortless manner. His strength was apparently not as good as that of Gong Yinjia. Gong Yinjia's demeanor was arrogant and domineering. However, he was at the top when it came to strength. He was a true powerhouse of the sage, accomplished realm. He was second only to the Heaven's Pride experts in terms of fighting prowess. This was why he had the confidence to behave in an arrogant and despotic manner. However, Yishuan had quickly realized that Tang Ken was far weaker than Gong Yanjia. Therefore, there was no comparison between him and a person like Yi Shiwen who stood bravely over a mountain of corpses and ocean of blood. They just weren't on the same level. Moreover, Yi Shiwen was in a moment of desperation right now. So he didn't hold back even a bit and attacked with his entire strength. The two individuals' attacks set off an incomparably dreadful storm. It swept out layer upon layer of energy just like sea waves. Tang Ken screamed and suddenly spouted a mouthful of blood. His body went out flying upside down the next moment. It wasn't clear how many of his bones had been fractured as a result. He landed at the edge of the fleeing troop and was immediately grabbed and torn apart by the Taoist priest-zombie. He screamed endlessly as his body got torn into two halves. Then his body was devoured. Nobody was in a mood to sympathize with this powerful person that used to be in the limelight. However, their opinion about Yi Shiwen had immediately changed. He had become an exceptionally fierce person in their eyes, since he had slaughtered two sage, accomplished level experts in succession. They had started taking him to be as ferocious as those three zombies that were pursuing them. A lot of people had been eyeing the sacred spring of life that was in his hands. However, this thought cooled down when they saw this scene. After all, they had realized that their small tricks wouldn't work on him. Yi Shiwen could feel that the auras of those three zombies were becoming increasingly formidable, as if someone had just awakened from a deep sleep. Getting increasingly scary. Yi Shiwen, I'm afraid an extraordinary person may be buried inside this tomb. And perhaps these three zombies were there to guard the inner chamber of this tomb. You people have woken up these three monsters by bursting into the tomb. Yimo said, I can feel that some extraordinary being is lying therein. So, it would be better if you quickly left this place. The faster the better. The farther you go, the better it is. Yi Shiwen nodded. He also didn't want to stay here. Yi Zaiwen's speed was extremely fast. His speed had maintained at the peak even though he was carrying two individuals. He overtook the majority of people and reached near the gate in an instant, like a golden flash. However, he suddenly found out that the terrifying auras of those three monsters had firmly locked upon his body. They were pursuing him tightly and were getting closer. It was evident that they didn't wish to let him go. Those three zombies were like three heavy tanks. The experts in their way either got torn apart or went out flying. It was hard to tell whether these experts were dead or alive after being run over. The three zombies had been happily slaughtering these experts. However, they had suddenly started to ignore these experts and had made Yi Shiwen their primary target. Yi Zaiwen's devil wings were an incredible magical technique, and his agility skill was extremely quick. It wasn't clear how much distance he had traveled in an instant, just like a lightning flash. However, these three zombies had also been extremely ferocious individuals when they were alive. Therefore, each of them had excellent agility skill of their own. They also overtook the majority of experts in an instant. You had it coming. This guy has dared to rob the sacred spring of life. He deserves to be chased to the end of the world. The Zhuyan ape wasn't very far. It had noticed that the target of these three zombies was Yi Shiwen now. Therefore, it started to take pleasure in Yi Zaiwen's misfortune. The fact that it couldn't obtain the sacred spring of life was eating him inside. However, it was no longer depressed because of this fact. On the contrary, it felt glad because those three zombies would have been chasing it instead of Yi Shiwen if it had taken away the sacred spring of life. And it reckoned that they would have caught him by now since its agility skill wasn't good enough. In fact, it would have been dead by now. Soon, the other experts also felt glad, as they also found out that these three zombies were chasing Yi Shiwen. They promptly got out of the way so that they didn't get injured. Those three zombies didn't have any interest in them for the time being. Everyone got ignored apart from a few unlucky ones that came in the way of those zombies. These experts were suddenly feeling glad that they hadn't snatched the sacred spring of life. Otherwise, they would have died without a doubt. Yi Shiwen felt that those zombies were getting increasingly close to him. Moreover, their auras became increasingly powerful as they approached him. Three ice-cold and formidable auras had firmly locked upon him. It was needless to say that it seemed that they wouldn't give up until they dismembered his body into 10,000 pieces. They roared again and again, and their ominous energy soared everywhere. The devil wings were a top-tier agility technique. However, Yi Shiwen was merely at the peak of Sage Realm. Those three monsters that were behind him had been suppressed by the rules of the Great Gas Collar. Otherwise, it wasn't clear what grade of monsters they were. In addition, their agility techniques were no joke. They were catching up little by little. This is bad. We will get caught sooner or later if things go on like this. Yi Shiwen fully unleashed his devil wings. Wind and thunder loudly swept out from them, and endless wind and thunder power surged towards those zombies that were behind him. He didn't wish to give up the sacred spring of life. However, he didn't wish to get caught either. Therefore, he could only use such distractions to increase the distance between him and the zombies, and buy some time for himself. The speed of the three zombies was extremely high. They had approached the tomb's exit in the blink of an eye. There was a whole wide world outside as long as Yi Shiwen managed to get out. However, could the worst come to the worst? Could they chase him even if he escaped from the Great Gas Collar? To be continued. Chapter 569. It seemed that those three zombies had also thought about this thing. Therefore, they roared furiously, and all kinds of corpse power techniques swept towards Yi Shiwen. Bang! 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 Three dreadful attacks got stopped by the heavenly source mirror. But the huge explosions had opened a hole in the protective barrier of the heavenly source mirror, and a part of the attack swept in through the gap. However, could it pose any threat to a person like Yi Shiwen? Yi Shiwen barged out of the tomb's main exit in a flash. He then turned around, and he saw that those three zombies were just roaring angrily near the exit. However, they didn't dare to step out of the tomb. Apparently, they were afraid of something. Yi Shiwen finally heaved a sigh of relief. These zombies were extremely scary. They wouldn't have allowed him to leave the Great Gas Collar if they hadn't been trapped inside the tomb. Perhaps they would have eventually caught up with him, and Yi Shiwen couldn't have avoided facing them at that time. The two women finally breathed a sigh of relief after getting rid of these terrifying monsters. They had cultivated to the sage Great Perfection realm, so they could be also considered as experienced and knowledgeable individuals. However, these three zombies were the most terrifying creatures that they had come across in their entire lifetimes. Therefore, they were 100% sure that they wouldn't have been able to come out alive if it hadn't been for Yi Shiwen. Other people were left dumbstruck, since only these three individuals had managed to escape. Everyone had thought that they would be able to escape since these three zombies had begun to chase Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen had managed to escape, and these three zombies had been stopped at the gate of the tomb. This had made them so depressed that they wanted to die. They had initially been taking joy in Yi Shiwen's hardship. However, they had become extremely depressed now, so much so that they felt as if they were going crazy. That Juyan ape had been gloating the most at first. However, he had now been entrapped inside the tomb by the three zombies. Yi Shiwen and those three zombies were extremely fast. However, the other experts weren't much slower. They didn't get enough time to stop their forward momentum and consequently bumped into the zombies. This led to another bloody massacre. There had been a narrow gap in the three-echelon formation that was laid out by those three zombies. And those experts that had wanted to escape thought that they could manage an escape from that gap. However, it was as difficult as ascending to the heaven. Clang! A sky-shaking sword light suddenly camouflaged the horizon entirely. Boundless sword beams dazzled everyone, and energy surged about. Then, a white figure rushed out of the tomb like a streamer of light. It was that white-clothed youth. He possessed an extremely outstanding sword technique. Countless sword lights had burst out from his body, and he had forcibly escaped from the hands of those three dreadful zombies. Yi Shiwen frowned. He hadn't been able to see through the cultivation of this white-clothed young man this entire time. His cultivation was extremely strong, and some of his attacks looked beyond the capacity of an average sage, accomplished level expert. Yi Shiwen, This man might have lowered his cultivation in order to enter the Great Gas Collar, Yi Mo said. His real cultivation is likely at the half-step Great Sage realm. Yi Shiwen understood Yi Mo's words clearly. It had happened once that a great sage expert with suppressed cultivation was besieged and killed by people. However, that didn't mean that such a thing wouldn't occur again, especially if there were enough benefits on the line. The sacred spring of life and a seat in the top inheritances of the Great Gas Building were examples of such benefits. These things were attractive even for the great sage experts. Therefore, it wasn't impossible that a great sage would suppress their cultivation and come in. Unexpectedly, that Jian ape was the next one to attempt exiting the room after this man. It transformed into flames and rushed out while cursing. The Taoist priest zombie behind him repeatedly slashed the sword that he was holding in his hand and unleashed layer upon layer of Tao-based attacks. It seemed that he would cleave the Jian ape into two halves. The Jian ape didn't dare to stay there. He quickly escaped. However, the Silver Eagle King, which was behind him, wasn't so lucky. It got devoured by the Buddhist monk zombie. Its entire body was chewed into several pieces and was then swallowed by the zombie. It was a terrifying and gory scene. Not even 2 out of 10 experts that had gone inside for the treasure hunt managed to come out alive. This news had shaken the entire Great Gas Collar. Not all experts knew about the sacred spring of life at first. In fact, a considerable number of experts didn't know that a thing like sacred spring of life even existed. Moreover, the majority of experts that knew about it had consciously kept this place a secret. After all, nobody wanted more people to arrive here and compete with them. However, they spoke out about this matter one after another without any hesitation after it had ended with the sacred spring of life falling into Yi Ziwen's hands. In addition, some sinister people had fanned the flames behind the scenes. As a result, many experts were looking for Yi Shiwen at this time. Almost all the experts that had arrived in the Great Gas Collar were sage experts, and who among them wouldn't want to advance a step ahead in the future and enter the Great Sage realm? After all, the strength of a person would advance by leaps and bounds after they entered the Great Sage realm. Also, their lifespan would increase by double. Most importantly, their status would be entirely changed after they entered the Great Sage realm. They would become an absolute existence in the universe. Suddenly, everyone in the Great Gas Collar was discussing about that lump of sacred spring of life, and also about Yi Shiwen. Gee, that boy is very lucky. That lucky bastard has obtained the sacred spring of life. Lucky bastard? I see it as misfortune. It's hard to say how many people have issued statements and asked him to obediently surrender the sacred spring of life. Otherwise, they would kill him. Kill him? Humph, humph. I'm afraid it's not that easy. A small team of experts had found that guy day before yesterday. There was even a sage accomplished level expert in that group. However, only one of them survived in the end, and that person had to escape in a distress situation. In fact, this man also wouldn't have survived if the Yi Shiwen hadn't left him alive as a warning for others. This guy is a cruel and merciless lord. This matter had become sensational. However, it started to cool down with the passage of time. Undoubtedly, many people were eyeing the sacred spring of life. However, the majority of people hadn't come to the Great Gas Collar to obtain it. The majority of people had arrived for the Great Gas Building. Half a year had passed, and the Great Gas Building was on the verge of opening. The majority of people had arrived to obtain the top 10 seats in the Great Gas Building. Everyone had begun to move closer towards the Great Gas Building since it was about to open. Many streamers of light could be seen sweeping across the sky at this time. The Great Gas Building was an extremely tall building that had stretched beyond the clouds. However, it looked simple and unadorned from afar. The atmosphere inside the Great Gas Collar was exuding endless divine beams and purple mist at the moment. This place was the center of the entire Great Gas Collar. Demon beasts and human experts had arrived in abundance here. 3 figures arrived from the distance while treading on rainbow lights. It turned out to be a man with 2 women on either side of him. The man was dressed up in cyan clothes. He possessed handsome facial features. Those 2 beautiful women had surrounded him from either side. This was the team of Yi Shiwen Ding Tong, and Xiao Yuan Yuan. Half year has passed, and it's finally going to open now. Yi Xuan looked afar at the great gas building. He was deeply moved by the sight. He had used the majority of the last half year's time for consolidating his Sage Peak realm and firmly establishing his foundation. He had always used a stable low-level realm for handling high-level fighting prowess. This had compelled him to lay a solid foundation. His foundation had become polished and exceptionally solid after half year's tempering. Now there was no risk of falling back. His cultivation had also fully reached the peak of Sage realm after tempering for last half year. He was just one step away from entering the Sage Small Perfection realm. This had given him the confidence to arrive here and compete for a seat of Great Gas Building. Yi Shiwen and Yi Mo had together analyzed the matter of the Great Gas Building. The individuals with strength above Sage realm weren't allowed to enter the Great Gas Collar. However, it wasn't necessary that only people with Sage realm strength could enter this place. The experts of half-step Great Sage realm or Great Sage realm could also enter as long as they suppressed their cultivation. The Great Sages had an image of being proud and complacent individuals. However, they were afraid that they might get besieged by people like that one time earlier. However, it wasn't impossible either. These Great Sages were on the same level as Sage, accomplished level experts after suppression. However, they were still far more powerful than ordinary Sage, accomplished level experts in terms of martial power and skill of strength utilization. Therefore, these experts were the most troublesome ones. Many ice-cold gazes swept over Yi Shiwen as soon as he arrived. These people obviously weren't welcoming to a new person's arrival, since it might decrease their chances of obtaining a seat. There were only 10 seats in the Great Gas Building, so it was already a very insignificant number in the sense wherein so many experts had gathered. A person himself had a meager opportunity. A few people had the confidence that they could kill the others and make a way out. However, the majority of people were planning to take advantage of the chaos and cut a bloody path out of the battlefield in order to obtain one seat. Yi Shiwen was calm, and his complexion was normal while facing these gazes. However, Ding Tong and Xiao Yuan Yuan weren't at ease like him. They had followed Yi Shiwen on many expeditions in the last half year, and they had also consolidated their strength of Sage Great Perfection realm. In fact, they could enter the Sage Accomplished realm at any time. Therefore, their strength couldn't be considered as weak. However, many of these gazes belonged to Sage Accomplished level experts. There hadn't been many experts of Sage Accomplished realm initially. However, the news of the opening of Great Gas Collar had attracted many top players of Sage realm from the nearby star fields. Consequently, there were so many experts assembled here that it seemed like a sea of experts. Yi Shiwen saw Sage Accomplished level experts wherever he looked. Some of them were strong, while some were weak. However, almost everyone's aura was terrifying. These auras were much more terrifying than that of those Sage Accomplished level experts that he had seen inside the tomb. This was because only a small number of people knew that there was a sacred spring of life present in that tomb. It wasn't like this place. Every expert's focus was fixed on this venue. Yi Shiwen. These people don't seem like the friendly bunch. Yi Mo clicked his tongue and said, "It seems that obtaining a seat is impossible if attempted peacefully. I wasn't planning to obtain a seat in a peaceful manner in the first place. I must seize a place, and I don't care if I have to cause a bloodbath to do so." Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and replied. This matter was doomed to be messy. A lot of visions that contained killing intentions for the green-scaled fruit swept out in the surroundings. "You're the Yi Shiwen, aren't you? Hand over the sacred spring of life, and he'll spare your life. You don't deserve to keep it." An ice-cold voice suddenly sounded from afar. To be continued. Chapter 570. You're the Yi Shiwen, aren't you? Hand over the sacred spring of life, and he'll spare your life. You don't deserve to keep it. A big guy with a red beard came from afar while treading the rainbow light. The boundless aura he brought along with him was surging about. He looked extremely ferocious. He was a senior expert of Sage Accomplished realm. His face was brimming with confidence at the moment. He coveted the sacred spring of life that was in Yi Zaiwen's possession. After all, this treasure could help him in making the breakthrough into the great sage realm. Therefore, it was the most important thing for him. The look in the eyes of this big guy with red beard appeared ice cold. He looked aloof and detached from worldly affairs. Moreover, the manner in which he had spoken had made it seem as if he was giving an order. Yi Shiwen was a nobody of sage realm peak in his eyes. He was merely an ordinary person, merely an ant, and he had still dared to appear here. Wasn't this a golden opportunity bestowed upon that expert by the heavens? Other people hadn't paid attention to Yi Shiwen yet. Otherwise, they would have confronted Yi Shiwen and then snatched the sacred spring of life from him. After all, the sacred spring of life was like a ticket that could take a person directly to the great sage realm. Therefore, this big guy definitely wouldn't give up. What? He is Yi Shiwen? This boy is very audacious. He has dared to come to this place. I would have found some safe place in the great gas collar and undergone closed-door training for several hundred years if I were him. After all, things become entirely different after one has made the breakthrough into the great sage realm. This guy has always been extremely audacious. He has obtained the sacred spring of life, but he still isn't satisfied. Now he is coveting one of the 10 seats. He is asking for it. God knows how many people are eyeing his sacred spring of life covetously. And now he has been confronted by an evil guy like Ran Hongbin. Many people knew about Yi Shiwen, so they casted their sharp gazes on him after his identity got exposed by that big expert with red beard. The allure of the sacred spring of life was very strong, and these people had great self-confidence. They were ambitious and vigorous. They believed that Yi Shiwen was like a child who had arrived in a bustling street with a piece of gold in his hands. He was simply asking to be robbed. Many eyes among them contained a look of disdain. What was a trivial person of sage realm peak in front of them? They didn't believe the rumor that a sage accomplished level expert had lost at Yi Zaiwen's hands. In fact, this absurd rumor was laughable to them. Fu, *K off. Yi Shiwen spoke only these 2 words in the face of the threatening and imposing aura of Ran Hongbin. Suddenly, the entire place went silent. They had anticipated all kinds of possibilities in this situation. They had also thought that Yi Shiwen might refuse. However, they had never expected that he would refuse so blatantly, and with such contempt at that. Ran Hongbin became furious. He could tell that the gazes in the surroundings contained an element of mockery for him at the moment. This young man before his eyes was as trivial as an ant. However, he had dared to tell him to Fu *K off in front of so many people. This was simply intolerable. Ran Hongbin shot a punch. It came with an incomparably overbearing palm shadow as it fell down towards Yi Shiwen from the sky. He had attacked with his entire strength and hadn't held back even a bit. In fact, it seemed that his attack would smash Yi Shiwen to death. The drumming sound of thunder reverberated in the entire sky and proliferated in all directions. This was Ran Hongbin's famous technique, the thunderclap tyrant fist. The fist's power was enormous and mighty. It seemed as if a thunder dragon which had been lurking in the clouds was roaring and coming down to kill Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen is done for. This thunderclap tyrant fist is a famous technique of a certain star field. I've heard about the incredible might of this fist technique. Ran Hongbin has obtained just an incomplete version of this technique. However, it still possesses enormous might since he has practiced it to the peak. It seems like the god of thunder himself has incarnated. What a pity! This boy had just appeared, and now he is about to die. The sacred spring of life will change hands this time. After that, it won't be that easy to snatch it from Ran Hongbin's hands. Almost everyone was optimistic about Ran Hongbin. Yi Shiwen looked like a debutante in front of Ran Hongbin who had long been famous. Yi Shiwen simply wasn't on the same level in their opinion. Moreover, Ran Hongbin hadn't underestimated Yi Shiwen. He had straightaway used the killing move of Thunderclap Tyrant Fist in order to crush Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen looked like a small boat on a mighty wave in the face of Ran Hongbin's stunning fist attack. He swayed up and down, and it seemed that he might get annihilated any time under this dreadful fist power. Audacious. A white-clothed young man was watching this fight from above a big tree at a faraway place. He slightly raised the corner of his mouth and drew a smirk. He then spat out these few words. However, it wasn't clear whether he had said it for Yi Shiwen or Ranhong-bin. Yi Shiwen would be able to identify this white-clothed young man if he were to see him. He was the same young man who had displayed the sky-shaking sword lights earlier. Yi Mo had guessed that his cultivation might have already surpassed the sage realm. In fact, Yi Mo believed that he had suppressed his cultivation to arrive here. Yi Shiwen slightly narrowed his eyes. The gazes that were hovering around didn't look very friendly. It seemed that these people were planning to snatch the sacred spring of life from his hands. And it appeared that they weren't ordinary. Ding Tong had advised Yi Shiwen not to compete for the inheritance seats of the Great Gas Building. After all, his arrival would certainly provoke many people that coveted the sacred spring of life. However, Shiwen hadn't paid attention to it. Everything was rather simple for him. He followed a simple rule: sort out the ones who are ambitious. Yi Shiwen finally moved into action at this time while facing the overwhelming fist attack. He shot a punch, and it drifted forward smoothly. In fact, it seemed as if a light feather was drifting amidst a collapsing mountain. However, this drifting light feather immediately shattered the momentum of that collapsing mountain and rendered it ineffective. It had looked slow. However, it was extremely quick. It had instantly defeated the fist power of the thunderclap tyrant fist. Ranhong-bin had looked carefree until this moment. However, he was left stunned now. He was a peerless expert. It wasn't known how many enemies he had killed. He had reached this far by braving through countless bloody battles. Naturally, he possessed a rich fighting experience. However, he had been greatly startled when he saw that Yi Shiwen had effortlessly routed his fist power. This was clearly the power of the realm he dreamed of, lifting light weight as if it's heavy realm. He had made the breakthrough into Sage realm many years ago, and he had already mastered the lifting heavy weight as if it's light technique. A mountain in his hands would appear as light as a large feather. However, he could never obtain this power of breaking the enormous momentum of a collapsing mountain with a feather as if it was nothing. He might be able to achieve the lifting light weight as if it's heavy technique in the future. However, it would still be impossible for him to reach to the same level of brute strength as Yi Shiwen and pull off such a thing. His complexion suddenly changed as he realized this. He hadn't underestimated this man in front of him. He had attacked with his entire strength from the get-go. He had showed no mercy. So, it couldn't be said that he had underestimated Yi Shiwen. However, he had failed to figure out Yi Ziwen's fighting prowess in the beginning. Yi Ziwen's fighting prowess could in fact be placed in the Sage Accomplished realm as per his move just now. Impossible. How could you possibly master this realm? Ranhong-bin couldn't help but blurt out. He couldn't conceal the shock in his heart. He knew this realm entirely well. It had nothing to do with strength. It might be possible that even a great sage expert couldn't reach the edge of this realm. On the other hand, this insignificant man had grasped this realm completely. Many years had passed. Yi Shiwen was no longer in the initial stage where he had only half knowledge of this realm. Now, he could freely enter and exit the lifting heavy weight as if it's light realm and lifting light weight as if it's heavy realm. And he could smoothly switch between these realms as well. Ranhong-bin's complexion had turned unsightly. He didn't feel as confident since he had seen Yi Shiwen attacking abilities now. He hadn't underestimated Yi Shiwen initially. Other people couldn't see, but he could feel how ferocious Yi Shiwen was. Bang! His body suddenly shook violently, and his entire real elemental energy began to surge. It seemed as if he had transformed into thunder. A crackling sound echoed from his body. He was inside an endless pool of thunder. It seemed as if a mighty god of thunder had incarnated. All kinds of ancient spells had emerged around him. A fist swept out and transformed into a giant thunder dragon. That shadow of a giant dragon mounted the clouds and roared. It then shrouded Yi Shiwen. It seemed that it would immediately devour him. He had unleashed his entire strength. He hadn't held back even a bit. A mantis trying to stop a chariot. Yi Shiwen sneered. A big hand suddenly stretched out. This hand was a blend of three palm techniques: Thousand Stars Tyrant Palm, Fire Clouds Falling Sky Hand, and Control Crane's Seven Divine Hands. Yi Shiwen had nearly deduced these techniques to perfection. Yi Shiwen had blended a few big palm techniques in an instant. Only he could pull off something like this. In fact, it would be extraordinary if other people managed to practice even one of them to the pinnacle. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's big golden hand and Ran Hong Bin's thunder dragon suddenly collided in the sky. The terrible collision issued boundless shock waves. Ran Hong Bin's eyes opened wide when he saw that Yi Zaiwen's big golden hand had penetrated all the obstructions in a flash. Yi Shiwen grabbed the thunder dragon and clutched its neck. It seemed as if he was holding a viper in his hand. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's golden hand exerted pressure and crushed that thunder dragon. It disintegrated into small pieces just like paper paste and transformed into a mass of thunder and lightning. Ran Hong Bin's offensive crumbled in an instant after that thunder dragon got strangled by Yi Shiwen. It must be known that the thunder dragon was the nucleus of his fist technique. It was also his strongest point. But Yi Shiwen possessed vicious insight. So, he had understood that it was Ran Hong Bin's most crucial aspect. An ordinary person couldn't do anything even if they figured out this weakness of their opponent. It was indeed the central part. However, it was also the strongest part. Therefore, they couldn't annihilate it even after knowing about it. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He had the power to crush it in an instant. Yi Shiwen had routed Ran Hong Bin's offensive in an instant. He then arrived in front of Ran Hong Bin amidst the sparks of electric light. Impossible! Ran Hongyin shouted. He couldn't believe that he had been outdone by a nobody of Sage Realm Peak. This had simply subverted his outlook of the world. However, Yi Shiwen didn't wish to explain it to him. He just wanted to make an example out of Ran Hong Bin in order to let the other covetous people know that they should drop the idea of fighting him if they cherish their lives. Bang! Yi Zaiwen's incredible fist power pounded upon Ran Hong Bin's body. Ran Hong Bin screamed as he got transformed into a mass of blood fog. Both his body and soul had been destroyed. To be continued. Chapter 571. There was a pin-drop silence on the scene. A vast area in the vicinity of the Great Gas Building was completely silent. It seemed that even the sound of breathing could break this tranquility. The fight between Yi Shiwen and Ran Hong Bin had attracted the gazes of countless people. It was a fight between a giant and an ant in their opinion. They had believed that defeating Yi Shiwen would be as easy as blowing off dust. In fact, they wouldn't have had any interest in watching this fight if it hadn't involved the sacred spring of life. However, Yi Shiwen, who should have been crushed to death, was in perfect condition after the fight. But Ran Hong Bin, who was a colossus in their opinion, had been slaughtered. This outcome had simply subverted their whole outlook of the world, life, and their personal experiences. Driving full speed against the traffic wouldn't be as scary as this outcome. An expert of Sage Realm Peak had effortlessly killed a sage, accomplished level expert. What would these people do if such dark horses were to move unhindered in this world? Yi Zaiwen's eyes swept across everyone like an electric current. He had resorted to extreme methods because he wanted to warn these people. They must think properly if they were planning to snatch the sacred spring of life from his hands. Otherwise, they would have to pay the price with their own lives. This method was straightforward and violent. However, it was very effective. Yi Shiwen had killed Ran Hong Bin at a lightning speed. He hadn't fooled around at all, and this had thoroughly deterred all those people who were ready to make a move. It should be mentioned that the majority of people had been coveting the sacred spring of life. Yi Zaiwen's cultivation was only at the Sage Realm Peak. Therefore, they had felt as if a child had come to a market area with a piece of gold in his pocket. Consequently, that child had been surrounded by the bad gazes of all the adults. However, they soon found out that even several adults couldn't rival this child's skills. This had shocked the people who had been planning on seizing the sacred spring of life. In fact, those experts of Sage, Great Perfection Realm, and Sage Small Perfection Realm had immediately stopped thinking about this matter. After all, could they still dare to provoke this monster? Many people pondered. It's no wonder that this man has dared to arrive here with such confidence. He must have some big reliance. He might look weak at first glance. However, he is a merciless lord of death. Ding Tong and Xiao Yuan were also thinking so. They had seen Yi Shiwen killing Sage, accomplished level experts in the last few months. However, he hadn't killed them so easily in the beginning. He was very powerful at that time as well. However, he didn't possess such loftiness at that time. Now, it seemed as if a sage, accomplished level expert was basically nothing before him. The powerful Ran Hong Bin would have shaken the entire world with his might if he had been placed in the world outside. However, he had met with such a humiliating death at Yi Zaiwen's hands. He couldn't withstand even 3 moves. He had been killed by Yi Shiwen in a flash. Everyone was left dumbstruck as they witnessed this insane strength. They had never seen such a formidable expert of Sage Realm Peak before. In fact, they were thinking that even the elders of their sex might not be a match for him. This man was way too strong. Ding Tong and Xiao Yuan belonged to different sections. However, they had the same opinion on this matter. He is that Yi Shiwen. A man was quietly standing in a corner in the shade of a mountain. His gaze penetrated through dozens of miles and fell upon Yi Zaiwen's figure. The distance of dozens of miles was no big deal for experts with high cultivation. These were the people of the dominating Heaven Dojo. They were led by a middle-aged man who had robust facial features. He looked similar to King Tai. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Shiwen. His eyes were filled with bitter hatred because he was none other than King Tai's father, King Yi. King Tai was his most beloved son. He had nurtured him to be the future lord of the clan. He could have become the leader of the dominating Heaven Dojo, or even the Great Gas City. He was the one who could have carried forward his legacy. However, he had died at Yi Zaiwen's hands. King Yi had been devastated when he had heard this news. After that, only boundless hatred for Yi Shiwen was left in his heart. The rumors about Yi Shiwen had continued to become more and more intense in the last few months. And he was the one who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes and secretly spreading these rumors. Yi Shiwen, I must kill you. King Yi clenched his teeth in extreme anger and said, I'll use your head as sacrifice so that my son's soul rests in peace. Yi Shiwen had always been sensitive to gazes. However, the extreme hatred in this gaze had made him even more alert. Therefore, he had almost immediately noticed King Yi, even though the latter had been hiding in a corner. Yi Shiwen, these people aren't looking at you with good intentions. It is obvious that they want to kill you. You must be careful, Yi Mo alerted Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen frowned. He took a step forward and crossed dozens of miles in one go. He had arrived in front of King Yi in an instant. He then swept his vision across all the people of the dominating Heaven Dojo. I didn't know that the people of dominating Heaven Dojo are still being haunted by the ghost of the past. He smirked. The people of dominating Heaven Dojo wouldn't be after me just because I had snatched the items from King Tai in the auction. I'm almost certain that these people have received the news about what had happened later on. Otherwise, they wouldn't be looking at me with so much hatred in their eyes. The killing intention flickered in Yi Zaiwen's heart as he thought about this. These people of dominating Heaven Dojo weren't going to leave him alone. He had anticipated that he might have to face a great sage expert's attack after getting out of here. And his anger grew thicker after thinking this. Yi Shiwen, you've killed my son. I won't spare you. King Yes' anger soared as he said. He was staring at Yi Shiwen with his ice-cold vision, just like a wolf. He was wishing that he could dismember Yi Zaiwen's body into 10,000 pieces. Your son has only himself to blame for his death. There is no reason to pity his death. Yi Zaiwen's facial expression turned ice-cold as he replied. What did you say? King Yi pounced towards Yi Shiwen like a wild beast. The universe turned upside down in an instant. Seemingly inexhaustible deadly lights swept out towards Yi Shiwen. It was a killer move. He had used such a move because of 2 reasons. First, he had bitter hatred for Yi Shiwen in his heart. Second, he had seen Yi Zaiwen's formidable fighting prowess a moment ago. So, he didn't wish to give Yi Shiwen any opportunity to counterattack. He must kill him quickly. However, Yi Shiwen was already prepared to face such an attack. Therefore, he was prepared since the beginning as to what he should do if this man suddenly attacked. Bang! Yi Ziwen's big hand crushed all the deadly lights and offensives. Those deadly lights and offensives couldn't budge him. In fact, they couldn't even change his facial expression. Bang! 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 The sounds of explosion echoed in everyone's ears. An earth-shattering sound reverberated every time the two figures collided in the sky. The sounds of explosion shook the entire world, and energy proliferated everywhere. King Yi was the leader of the dominating Heaven Dojo. He was far stronger than King Tai. In fact, even Ran Hongbin might not be a match for him. Yi Shiwen attacked incisively. A big hand swept out, and the shadow of his palm covered the entire sky. King Yi had also gone all out on the other side. He launched an attack towards Yi Shiwen with his entire strength. The two were locked in the fight for a moment. Suddenly, the entire world turned quiet. The divine beams had dispersed in all directions. After all, Yi Shiwen had grabbed King Yi's neck with his hand. He had firmly clutched his neck just like an iron hoop. Then, the killing intention surged up in Yi Shiwen's heart. After all, King Yi harbored a very heavy killing intention for him. So, how could Yi Shiwen leave behind a trouble for the future? Yi Shiwen tightened his grip, and it became even more difficult for King Yi to breathe as a result. His face turned purple, and he started to appear even more sinister. His soul had also been imprisoned by Yi Shiwen. Consequently, he couldn't mobilize his real elemental energy. He looked like an ordinary person at this moment. He would die in a moment if Yi Shiwen increased the pressure on his neck. The sage experts were above the ordinary people. However, they still had this weakness. Stop! Suddenly, an arrogant voice came from afar, and a roughly 20 years old handsome man fell from the sky the next moment. He was dressed in a magnificent robe. His fair face carried traces of arrogance. He disdainfully looked at Yi Shiwen and said, "Stop. Who are you? Why do you want to interfere in this matter?" Yi Shiwen asked vigilantly. He wanted to exterminate these people from the dominating Heaven Dojo. There is a so-called saying, when the weeds are not eliminated along with the roots, they grow once again in the spring wind. Everyone understood this saying. These experts of dominating Heaven Dojo might scheme against him in the future if he ignored them now. And Yi Shiwen couldn't tolerate this thing. Therefore, he had taken the initiative against them. It is better to get rid of the dangers as early as possible. This was Yi Ziwen's principle. Humph! In the guardian of this great gas building. "You're in my territory now," that handsome and extraordinary man arrogantly replied. Guardian? Yi Shiwen recalled the information he had received in the past. People had a hunch that the great gas building might be some divine tool. However, nobody knew whether it was true or false. However, a person that used to claim himself as the great gas building's guardian would appear every time it opened. However, a different person would appear every time. Nobody knew about their background. Nobody even knew where they came from. These people were very mysterious. Moreover, each of them was extremely formidable. They were far more powerful than ordinary sage, accomplished level experts. An expert of half-step great sage realm had once suppressed his cultivation and fought with one of these guardians. However, he had suffered a crushing defeat. Consequently, he had lost his motivation and the possibility of making progress in the future. These guardians were merely the experts of sage, accomplished realm. However, they could often display fighting prowess that was far greater than that of an expert of sage, accomplished realm. This was the dreadful aspect of these guardians. However, weren't these guardians only supposed to protect the Great Gas Building? Why had one of them come out to interfere in someone else's business? These guardians also had some control over who would get the heritages of the Great Gas Building. Therefore, one mustn't make these guardians their enemy when they meet them. In fact, one must try hard to be friends with these guardians so that they could obtain their favor regarding the heritages of Great Gas Building. That's right. And I want you to stop this now. That young guardian's face exposed arrogance as he said. After all, he believed that Yi Shiwen must follow his orders in an obedient manner. Don't you have any other thing to do? Why are you meddling in someone else's matter? Yi Shiwen looked at him maliciously and said, How dare you say that I'm meddling in other people's matters? Very well, I am expropriating your eligibility for the heritages. The young guardian's face looked sinister as he said, To be continued. Chapter 572. Expropriate qualifications for the heritages. The faces of the experts in the surroundings revealed smiling expressions as they heard these words. They had also seen Yi Zaiwen's dreadful fighting prowess. He would prove to be a formidable opponent in the contest for the 10 seats. Therefore, their chances would increase greatly if Yi Shiwen was eliminated from the contest. Yi Zaiwen's complexion had turned ice cold. Hong Jun, save me. King Yi had been clutched by Yi Zaiwen's big hand. So, he promptly yelled since Yi Shiwen had nearly choked him to death. Yi Shiwen suddenly understood that both of them were familiar with each other. Nothing had happened when he killed Ran Hong been a moment ago. However, this goddamn guardian had come out to interfere now when it was King Ye's turn. Guardian my ass. He's just biased towards his own people. Let him go, Hong Jun coldly said. Get lost. Yi Shiwen coldly replied. Hong Jun's complexion suddenly turned a deep shade of red because of anger. The Guardians had always had an awe-inspiring existence. So, these experts must curry favor with Hong Jun regardless of whether they had powerful strength or not. After all, it was impossible to obtain a heritage without his permission. Hong Jun had never been disregarded like this. Just an ordinary expert of Sage Realm Peak dares to be this arrogant? It seems that you lack discipline. A person's contemptuous voice proliferated from inside the crowd. You dare to talk back to the Guardians? It was obvious from the voice that this individual wanted to gain Hong Jun's favor. Everyone had heard him. It turned out to be a demon beast. It was a huge Tyrannosaurus. It was a very famous demon king in the Great Gas Collar. Come forward and speak if you have the guts to do so. Yi Shiwen sneered while looking at that Tyrannosaurus. You want me to come forward? Here I come. The Tyrannosaurus suddenly trod forward, and its hill-sized body pounded in front of Yi Shiwen just like a meteor. The world shook under its impact. It alone caused an earthquake kind of impact and shocked everyone. The Tyrannosaurus was arrogantly looking at Yi Shiwen. It didn't move its eyes away from him even for a moment. Then, a claw suddenly stretched out towards Yi Shiwen to grab him. Its front claw was small compared to its body. However, it was still bigger than Yi Zaiwen's body. Yi Shiwen understood that this Tyrannosaurus wanted to kill him so that it could gain this so-called guardian's favor in order to obtain a seat. In fact, there were many people that were thinking the same. Yi Shiwen had killed Ran Hong been only recently. Still, many people were willing to risk their lives for this opportunity. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. It seems that I didn't deter everyone a while ago. Some people still want to rush out recklessly. A big golden hand suddenly stretched out. The fire cloud's falling sky hand suddenly issued a golden tide and slammed down. The palm and the sharp claw collided in the sky. The body of the Tyrannosaurus was extremely tough. It could break the mountains and cut open the world. Bang! The claw of the Tyrannosaurus turned into a mass of blood fog on the spot, and the fragments of its bones swirled in the air. Roar! The Tyrannosaurus screamed endlessly. It hadn't anticipated that its front claw would be destroyed by Yi Shiwen in the first collision itself. In fact, such strength left everyone to hold their breaths. And the experts and demon beasts that were getting restless were stunned by this. They had been thinking about obtaining the Guardian's favor at Yi Zaiwen's expense, but they gave up that thought at this time. Audacious! You dare to commit a violent crime in front of me? Hong Jun shouted. Then, his terrifying aura swept out towards Yi Shiwen like a tide, and dreadful energy waves ferociously swept down. However, Hong Jun's interference couldn't change the Tyrannosaurus' fate. After all, Yi Zaiwen's rage had already been ignited. An inverting ocean seal formed in the sky and fell down in an instant like a tilted ocean. Rumble! The Tyrannosaurus had been locked on to by Yi Zaiwen's attack. It wanted to escape. However, it wasn't able to do so. It got crushed into fragments in an instant. You want him, right? I'll return him to you. The blue veins in Yi Zaiwen's hands bulged out. Then he suddenly threw King Yi towards Hong Jun, as if he was a piece of trash. Whoosh! King Yi screamed as he got thrown away. His body cut through Hong Jun's terrifying aura and energy waves, and finally arrived in front of him. Hong Jun coldly snorted and unfolded his hands to catch King Yi. Bang! A loud metal clanging sound was heard, and a terrifyingly massive force transmitted to Hong Jun's hand through King Yi's body. Bang! 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 Hong Jun continuously trod on the ground and left profound footprints in it. Then, he turned his head to look once the tremendous force had dissipated. However, he found out that King Yi was already dead. His soul had been shattered by Yi Shiwen. Hong Jun was shocked to death upon this realization. You want to die? Hong Jun opened his eyes wide in rage. Yi Shiwen had killed his friend in front of his eyes. He had killed a person that was close to him. This was a matter of great shame and humiliation for him. Consequently, his torch-like eyes swept out two sword lights towards Yi Shiwen. However, it was impossible for him to affect Yi Shiwen since Yi Zaiwen's cultivation was extremely profound. Yi Shiwen, it seems that this shitty guardian hates you very much. It would be better to kill him as well and be done with it. Otherwise, he'll certainly plot against you when the contest for the seats begins, Yi Mo said. Yi Shiwen nodded. He could also see the bitter resentment and infinite killing intention in Hong Jun's eyes. He might have to face trouble in the future if he didn't kill him as soon as possible. In fact, nobody knew whether the matter about the so-called guardians of the Great Gas Building was real or fake. Some people guessed that they might originate from some formidable and mysterious organization, while others believed that the Great Gas Building itself was the base camp of this force. It was their stronghold. However, everyone had come to acknowledge the fact that these guardians possessed very tyrannical strength, regardless of what was said in the legends or how many different opinions were present. An ordinary expert of sage, accomplished realm was simply not a match for them. The guardians didn't interfere in the disputes of other experts. They were like observers. However, this time's guardian had unexpectedly interfered in someone's matter. This was contrary to everyone's expectations. A lot of people felt sympathetic towards Yi Shiwen. After all, Yi Shiwen had previously had the opportunity to obtain a seat. However, it was gone now as he had unfortunately offended the guardian. It was impossible for a person to obtain a heritage if they offended a guardian. This had been the rule for the last several years. It wasn't that nobody had used their tyrannical power to go against the rules set by the guardians in the past. However, all of them had failed to obtain a heritage in the end. Therefore, there were many people who wanted to obtain the favor of the guardian. The guardians had a track record of not interfering with the contest. However, everything would become much simpler if the guardians left a loophole. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes. His murderous aura looked boundless and ice-cold. He had realized that it would be impossible for him to go forward if he couldn't kill this guardian. Therefore, he didn't hold back any further. His golden divinities condensed into pillars of golden light, and then soared into the sky while passing through the clouds. They appeared everywhere in an overwhelming manner. Yi Zaiwen's black hair was blowing in the wind. His eyes looked ice-cold and ruthless, and his entire body had turned golden. It seemed as if a golden god of war had reincarnated. Hong Jun's complexion turned ice-cold. It seemed that he had also found out that Yi Shiwen wasn't an ordinary person. It hadn't been a wise choice to offend Yi Shiwen. However, Hong Jun was clearly an arrogant person. Therefore, he still didn't feel that he had made a mistake by provoking Yi Shiwen. In fact, he still felt that Yi Shiwen was guilty of a terrible crime and was truly the most reprehensible person out there. Criminal, accept your death. There was an unconcealed, killing intention in Hong Jun's eyes. Criminal? Who the hell are you to judge me? Yi Shiwen wasn't angry. On the contrary, he grinned and exposed his white teeth. His words were filled with disdain and disregard. "Who the hell are you?" The many experts in the distance were shocked when they heard. Many years had passed since the time the Guardians had established their prestige. Nobody had ever dared to talk to them like this. To be continued. Chapter 573. Not many Guardians had appeared so far. However, the majority of people in the Rivershore Starfield had heard about these so-called Guardians. Even the people in the other nearby starfields were aware of this rumor. The people wouldn't have been so terrified if there had been only one Guardian all along. However, the fact that a different Guardian would appear every time had made these experts scared. Moreover, many people believe that there must be a huge organization behind them, and this meant that they mustn't be offended. "In the person that is going to take away your life," Hong Jun coldly replied. Meanwhile, his powerful aura swept out like a vast ocean. His expression turned callous, and he launched an attack towards Yishuan. "You've challenged my prestige of being a Guardian. Now, I will use your blood as sacrifice to redeem it." Hong Jun brandished his iron spear, and it issued a world-shaking sound. Its earth-shattering power was so overwhelming that it made the people feel as if it would break through the time and space barrier. These Guardians are very ferocious. They are truly worthy of their reputation. They have been unrivaled since so many years. Nobody within the range of the Sage realm can dare to provoke them, someone said in fear and apprehension. Apparently, such might had truly shaken this person. The space violently distorted wherever the iron spear went. The situation became intense. In fact, it seemed as if someone had poured oil on fire. However, Yishuan rushed up unarmed. He trod upon the golden divinities and got surrounded by a universe of his own. And all the attacks that were directed at his body were sucked by this universe. Hong Jun's iron spear broke the space. It wasn't known which ancient god his weapon had belonged to. However, Yishuan was also an overbearing lord, and he didn't show weakness while facing this weapon. Bang! 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 Both sides had already exchanged more than 100 blows within such a short time, and those were just probing attacks. However, both individuals had already gone all out. In fact, both of them had seemed determined to kill the opponent even though those were just probing attacks. The fight between these two individuals issued dreadful fluctuations. Those fluctuations then swept out in all directions from the point of their clash. And the experts that were observing in the front row went out flying upside down as a result. These experts had been several miles away. However, the shock waves had carried incredible force. The experts who had remained here to watch this fight had been swept away by the shock waves. There was a difference of heaven and earth between these weak experts and the ones that had gone to compete for the seats. Many of these experts spouted blood after being blasted away. Everyone was left in a state of disbelief upon the sight of Yishuan. After all, he was fighting with Hong Jun unarmed. This had surpassed everyone's imagination. It wasn't that they believed that nobody could fight with Hong Jun. After all, the Rivershore Starfield was very big. It obviously had to have some stunning geniuses, and a Guardian would eventually lose his invincibility once a formidable opponent appeared. It wouldn't matter how powerful that Guardian was in that case. There had been some cases in the past when the Guardians had been defeated. There were obviously only a few of such cases. However, it was enough to prove that the Guardians were mortals, not gods. However, what had stunned them incomparably was that Yishuan was attacking Hong Jun unarmed. Even the term irrationally strong couldn't describe such body. It's no wonder that the Tyrannosaurus front claw had been transformed into a massive blood fog in just one slap. Such tough physique is terrifying, someone suddenly reacted. Everyone knew that the individuals of the dragon race possessed incredibly tough bodies. The Tyrannosaurus was a kind of subdragon species that barely possessed the bloodline of dragon race. However, it was widely known that it had an incredibly tough body. However, the front claw of such a powerful subdragon had been transformed into a mass of blood fog with just a palm's clash. This could scare a person to death. However, it seemed normal at the moment. After all, Yi Shiwen was fighting unarmed with an expert that had a sage tool. In fact, it wasn't known how powerful his physical constitution was. Everyone held their breath as they saw this scene. Such strength made them feel far inferior to Yi Shiwen. Hong Jun's face unexpectedly revealed a smile. You have innate divine power. However, I hadn't expected that your Buddhist strength would be far more powerful than that of an ordinary person. It seems that you've practiced some incredible body power technique. However, it'll plunder everything you have after I've killed you. Thereafter, my strength will skyrocket. Yi Shiwen was like a mobile treasure house in Hong Jun's opinion at this time. He was especially drooling over the body power technique that Yi Shiwen had practiced. It wasn't that he hadn't practiced a body power technique himself. In fact, he had practiced a very famous one. However, he couldn't rely on his physical strength to contend against the demon beasts who themselves used to rely on their bodies. This was his innate weakness since he was a human, and there was no way to change it. Many demon beasts seemed to possess human-like wisdom. However, they would often be fooled by the humans. These things were innate. Only a person who had practiced a top-tier body power technique could contend against demon beasts. However, Yi Shiwen's strength was on a whole another level. You've made me even more excited. Hong Jun's face exposed a sinister smile. The aura exuding out of his body had become even more tyrannical. However, everything ends here. I don't know what kind of secret technique you are using that you possess such fighting prowess. However, you can't surpass mine. Yi Shiwen was just an expert of Sage Realm Peak. However, Hong Jun could see that Yi Shiwen was displaying the fighting prowess of Sage, accomplished realm. So, it was clear that he was using some kind of secret technique. Otherwise, it was impossible to do so. He had seen some people with insane fighting prowess who could challenge those who were a level above them. However, he had never seen or heard of an expert of Sage Realm Peak challenging an expert of Sage Accomplished Realm. So, it was obvious that Yi Shiwen was using some kind of secret technique. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to do so. You're ignorant. Yi Shiwen smirked. It was as if the things that Hong Jun didn't know didn't exist. This was a clear example of ignorance. Hong Jun's complexion turned somewhat ashen. He looked at Yi Shiwen with a cold and callous look in his eyes. In fact, his eyes seemed cold enough to kill a person. You're trying to infuriate me. It won't end well for you. Nobody can come and save you today. Hong Jun launched another attack after saying this. His iron spear issued a terrifying chill and swept out. It formed countless divine beams in the sky and slammed down like a boundless mountain. It seemed that it would definitely kill Yi Shiwen on the spot. However, how could Yi Shiwen let him succeed? He faced upward and roared. Simultaneously, his energy burst out and spread everywhere as the Big Bang Stardust fist swept out. Every fist blow transformed into a big star in the void and smashed down from above. It seemed as if a galaxy had suddenly condensed in the sky. Countless huge stars had formed in the sky and were about to crash down. The huge stars and the divine beams collided in the sky. They issued boundless divine waves every time they collided. The dreadful fluctuations attracted the attentions of those top players who were involved in the intense contest for the seats at the moment. However, the competition over there had reached a superheated stage. Blood was flowing like river, and a mountain-sized pile of corpses had formed. Everyone's eyes had turned bloodshot. They weren't able to cope with so many experts. Those people glanced at these two, and then shifted their attentions towards their own opponents. Only a short period of time had passed. However, 3 out of 10 seats had already been taken. The person who had obtained the first seat was none other than that white-clothed young man whom Yi Shiwen had seen earlier. His clothes were as fair as snow. His expression was calm and composed at the moment. He had been slashing his long sword in all directions, and nobody had been able to escape from his range. He had killed all the competitors in his region. Many of them had even been experts of Sage Accomplished Realm. However, all of them had died at his hands nonetheless. And they hadn't even been able to injure him. In fact, they hadn't been able to spill a drop of his blood. His tyrannical strength had terrified everyone. Some of the experts of other regions had been planning to change regions. However, they had quickly given up this thought. After all, nobody was in a mood to face such a demon. It was evident that no one had the guts to go against him. The second seat had fallen into the hands of a middle-aged man in blooded clothes. However, his clothes weren't just stained with blood like that of the white-clothed young man. In fact, it was as if his clothes had been soaked in blood. It seemed as if he had crawled out of a mountain of corpses and an ocean of blood. His facial expression looked ice-cold. He looked like a god of death from hell. He looked extremely ferocious and dreadful. He had killed most of the experts that had come in his way in order to compete for the seat. Moreover, those who hadn't died were in a miserable state at the moment. Yi Xuan would have been left in shock if he had seen who had gotten the third seat. It was that Juyan ape. He had fled away from those 3 zombies. However, he had revealed dreadful might at this place. He had defeated all the competitors and had obtained the third seat. These heritages weren't restricted to humans alone. Other creatures could also obtain them. Any creature could obtain these heritages as long as they possessed spiritual wisdom. In fact, even a piece of stone could obtain them if it possessed intelligence. The experts who were struggling at this time didn't have free time to pay attention to Yi Xiwen's fight. And Yi Xuan also didn't have the time to look how the contest for the seats was going on over there. His attention was entirely focused on Hong Jun's body. You seem to have some power to back up your confidence. It's no wonder that you've dared to challenge me. Hong Jun let out a cruel smile as he realized that he had the power to kill Yi Xuan. However, this is as far as you can go. This is it for you. Hong Jun pointed his long spear towards the empty space after he said this. It issued layer upon layer of energy waves as his figure swept towards Yi Xuan like a bolt of lightning. The surrounding atmosphere froze and broke into halves wherever the long spear went. Almost the entire space froze and collapsed. The boundless chill formed a massive and overwhelming network in midair in a split second and swept towards Yi Xuan to trap him. Is this all you've got? You think this is enough to kill me? Yi Xuan sneered. He trod, and the surrounding atmosphere transformed into a piece of universe. This was his domain. Then a fist swept out. It transformed into a big star and rolled down. Bang! A sharp and clear sound of collision was heard as that huge network of cold energy shattered under the crushing force of Yi Xiwen's big star. However, this fight was far from over. A long spear streaked across the sky and stabbed out just as Yi Xuan destroyed the network of ice. This was a killer move. This deadly stab had emerged from behind the magnificent network of ice. It could kill Yi Xuan in a split second. To be continued. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lord YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.